Welcome to the Lightforge. This is Ughbog.
This is Merps, and we are so close, guys. We're so freaking close. The expansion drops on Tuesday, and I'm pretty excited. What about you, man?
I'm extremely excited. We are so excited the expansion is coming out. We launched our website right before the expansion just to make sure it comes out okay. And it came out, and it is thelightforge.com. If you're a listener of the Lightforge and you didn't know that we had launched our website early in the week, go check it out. It has our tier list and nothing else. And it will not have anything else until much closer to the end of the year. While we work on things. But the tier list took us a lot of time, took us a lot of effort. The whole website dev team has worked really hard on it. And we also tweaked it a little just in the last couple days too. So if you checked it out beforehand, check it out again. I think we've gotten to a point where we're pretty comfortable with it. We'll be adding a couple more features to it over the course of the next month, but it's pretty much what it's going to look like. And now we have a much easier platform to update everything, which is nice.
Yeah, we released it a few days ago. Got a lot of really good feedback, and right now we are devoted to making the tier list better. We're also devoted to making sure on day 0 that everything is updated. We're going to continue to provide you guys with all of the arena knowledge that you guys want/need. And sacrifice a lot of sleep in the meantime in order to do it.
I wouldn't call it sacrifice. I think sleep is really just not intended to be had sometimes.
Well, I don't know about that. See, ADWCTA is sort of a machine in more ways than one, except for the part about machines being like strong and efficient in that way. But yes, he is definitely a machine, and we are breaking down, and the only thing keeping me going at least is knowing that we're going to get some juicy new cards to play with starting on Tuesday. So that's pretty exciting.
All right, so before we get into the Whispers of the Old God, let's talk about first what we did with the tier list. Not just in terms of making it pretty and putting it on a new website, but we had a huge tier list update in which, like, almost every single value was moved. It's not rocket science. We first moved everything down 2. So that's one of the key reasons why every single value moved. And we did it really just to make things look better, because the numbers are not like tied to anything. It's just all relative with each other. So if you move everything by the same amount, it kind of works. And we wanted 3 2s and 2 3s to be 50. So it's nice and even. And we recenter things around that, and then we rebalance things around that again. So what's one of the... Let's start off with one of the key things that we did based on our experiences with the League of Explorers meta.
Sure. I think there's a lot of things to talk about, but one thing that we definitely looked at was small removals, right? Small removals were something in which we always, you always want to ask the question, how important is the initiative, right? How important is the initiative, and how important is sort of the safety net of being able to remove something small? So we're talking about like the frost bolts and flame cannons, and other small removals like dark bombs, lightning bolts, and all that. And long story short, it's pretty effective. It's pretty good. And we also recognize that the safety blanket of being able to use these at any time in order to, quote, charge out these effects is extremely effective in letting you sort of take pressure off of your face or, prevent really good trades, right? Now, there's obviously downsides, as you guys know, if it's an empty board, or sometimes, you don't, it's not enough to just go merely 1 for 1, right? So when you're needing that value, it's not as good. But generally, from just playing within this meta and from just looking at how important is it, yeah, it's really good. And then there's the considerations where, like, ethereal conjurers, right? That was something like they put down a 6/3. Like, how do you punish conjurer? You have to either have a small thing on the board, or you need a small removal in hand. Otherwise, you can't possibly trade your big dude into an ethereal conjurer and still win the game. So,
yeah, they just solve problems, right? You have a problem, they fix it, it's done. So it gets an outsized value compared to what kind of its tempo or its card advantage or any of that stuff would seem to suggest. And there are also, so one of the things that I really focus on is whether a card is good in the hands of a good player, or whether a card is kind of okay in the hands of a good player, but better than it should be in the hands of a bad player. I like to use the hypothetical of a card that says, play this card whenever you draw it automatically. You have a 65% chance of winning the game and a 35% chance of losing the game. That's an excellent card for like the mass majority of players. It is an awful, awful card for a good player that's averaging like more than 70% wins, right? So in a card like that, on our tier list, we would value it at like a 0 because it would be the worst card possible. You would just automatically lose a certain percentage of your games, and it's a much higher percent than you would even if it was just a dead card in your hand. Like, I feel like I could win more than 65% of my game if one of the cards is just like, I don't know, like an Astral Communion, or like, not even Astral Communion, like Ancestral Call, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Or something like that. I feel like that would be okay. I would still win more than 65% of my games. But on the other hand, if you're kind of an average player, that card would be great. If you're averaging 50% win rate, like getting 65% win rate, instant 15% win rate whenever you draw that card. It's amazing. So that also guides a lot of what we do. And in terms of whether you're a good player or not, or like how good players really show that they're good, they show that they're good by making decisions. Because otherwise there's nothing else they're doing in the game that's different from what a bad player would do or what an average player would do. So these small removals kind of, they have different areas in which they are effective. There are different considerations of whether to hold them or use them, right? You can always use them in a tempo way, but that's not always the best way to use them. In fact, I think oftentimes, if not most times, it's not the right time to use it. So there's a lot of anticipation involved. There's a lot of assessing the situation involved. And there's a lot of turn planning involved to see, I could play this with which cards. And all of that really maximizes the value of these cards for good players, which gets extra points on our tier list. And the same way that like RNG gets bad points. You'll see this when Whispers of the Old God comes out and the Servant of Yogg-Saron comes out. You'll be like, oh my god, is it really that bad of a card? No, it's not. It's that bad of a card if you're a good player.
Yeah. And that sort of is a pseudo... It mimics this hypothetical card that ADWCTA is talking about, right? Any card in which the predominant effect is RNG and the effect is incredibly strong, that's something you want to avoid, right? At the same time, you can't get away with just drafting like spider tanks and yetis and crocs, because you just can't win that way, and you're giving up opportunity and sort of win shares by doing that. But you do want to avoid effects that are huge, that are like just automatically,
and especially like uncontrollable. That's the worst part, right? That's why my card, if the card didn't say you play it automatically when you draw it, then it wouldn't be bad at all, right? Because you can pick the times in which you're like just losing, and then you play it, and then it's a great card. Like that's why Deathwing's not a bad card, right? That's why even good players are like using Deathwing. Yes, it bails bad players out, but it bails good players out too.
The only uncertainty in Deathwing is what they have in terms of an answer. The uncertainty of the mage card that you're talking about is what happens. And if the uncertainty is what happens, then wow, like we're opening up a Pandora's box here.
Yep. And it's also why you'll see certain cards that like can get punished really hard, like let's say an Oasis Snapdraw by a Kodo or a Twilight Drake by an Earthshock. They don't seem to have as much value as you may think that they do on average, because if they have their value on average and it's a little bit better, that helps you win a little bit more. But if you were going to win anyway, unless like a certain amount of bad things happen, this just creates the variance that allows you to fall below the line in which you win more, in which you lose more frequently. So that's also a consideration. So one of the other changes we made in the tier list that I really want to talk about, because I love this change that we made, is Blessing of Might and Cold Blood.
I love Cold Blood. Oh my god.
They got raised so much. They may be a little high now, to be honest. I think we may have gone a little overboard with it, because they got like more than 10 points each. I think Cold Blood got like 20 points almost. And it's just because we've eventually come around to the idea that yes, they're tempo cards, just like a Hand of Protection, but unlike a Hand of Protection, what these cards do is they allow you to get the tempo and the control that you would not have had otherwise. All Hand of Protection does is it preserves your minion on the board. So it might as well read Summon Minion X again. Right. It has no real initiative, even though you're technically buffing a minion. Whereas Cold Blood, or any buffs that where you buff the attack, even if you also buff the defense, creates the initiative, and it's effectively a removal on top of that.
Right. I think a good way to talk about it is sort of like Hand of Protection preserves your initiative for next turn. The Cold Blood actually gives you more initiative this turn.
Right, exactly.
It's like that. Yeah.
And having more initiative this term, initiative is one of those things where good players are better at than bad players, right? Because initiative is you doing stuff. You doing stuff involves a lot of decision making. Decision making separates good and bad players. So all initiative cards kind of they're just better in the hands of better players and worse in the hands of worse players. Same with card draw, because card draw gives you options, and the more options you have, the better it is. If you know what you're doing, and the more confusing it is if you don't know what you're doing, right? So these are kind of like general themes in which you'll see good players and bad players performing like a bit differently with the same kind of cards that are really like the same value. So our whole tier list is kind of structured assuming you're like a really, really good player, and I think everyone should draft as if they're a really good player, whether they are or not, because that's the kind of playstyle you want to strive to play towards, right? If your whole deck is filled with my hypothetical card, like we'll call it Oddwick Wager, then you're never going to get better, right? You're going to win 60% of all your games from here on out, and that'll be it.
Right. And this is what you should do with when you want to get better with anything, right? It's like if you're playing StarCraft and it's like, well, I'm better at not using the hotkeys right now, so maybe I'll continue to not use the hotkeys and improve that way. But like, set your sights further, right? You do want to climb the ladder. You want to get better. So even though you sort of take a step back by sort of not just clicking and dragging your units and using the hotkeys, like use the hotkeys, and then that will actually get you to the end point, right? So at a certain point, you're going to have to use those hotkeys anyways. Just like in the arena, if you're drafting towards your current skill, you're putting a cap, and then at a certain point, in order to bust out of that cap, you're going to have to change the entire way that you draft again. So that's sort of like really counterproductive, right? Very short-sighted gains.
Yep, completely agree. Okay, anything else we want to talk about with the tier list and what we've done?
Hunter and Priest, but Priest is but Hunter was something that we looked at, and whenever you have a class that is not as flexible, right? And Priest and Hunter are about as like inflexible of a class as you can get today. And you have to sort of change the scores appropriately, because tier scores, they are in a vacuum, right? And in a vacuum, you can sort of pretend that they can sort of swing a little bit more control, swing a little bit more aggro, and these cards would fit. And it's sort of like, typically, where is this card, right? But if you have a class itself that really trends in one direction strongly, it really does affect the value of these cards, right? And with that in mind, we went back and looked at these two classes, and we think made appropriate changes in terms of like reach for Hunter. Cobra Shot has been
more
raised.
Smorky. I'm sure everyone's loving that.
Yeah, and it comes down to sort of
like, honestly, we were just like inconsistent with Hunter before. We would have cards like Lepernome that was just so absurdly outvalued even compared to its aggressiveness, because we were like, this is a really good card at Hunter, and then we would have other cards that could deal damage, and it wouldn't get those damage. So like it wouldn't get raised by the same amount, and so it just wasn't consistent.
Yeah. But anyways, you are correct. That is something I just wanted to mention. We're not going to list everything with the tier list because it deals with the old meta, and we want to talk about the new stuff, right? I want to talk about the old stuff.
All right. Let's talk about the new stuff. What is going on with the Whispers of the Old God?
Ooh. Oh,
just
my gosh.
Very general question. What is going on? What is happening? How are we approaching this? So I made like a video series, of which 12 of 13 parts I've already recorded. I think more than half of that have been released already. So people already have a good idea of what, and if you haven't watched that yet and you are listening to this 2-hour podcast, I think you may be interested in my video series as well. That will be like 4 hours, maybe 5 hours, but it'll go also really in depth, like a card by card. Like that's something we're not going to do here in the Lightforge for this. Yes, we are going to Whispers of the Old Gods, but we're not going to go card by card because there's more than 100 of them. It will actually take us like 10 hours for us to debate all of the cards, and you're going to find out pretty much what we think about it anyway once the tier list is released on Tuesday. And at that point, if you have any questions, just ask, right? Like we'll answer.
Yeah. But we are going to get into some discussion. So we wanted to organize this in a specific way, right? And
more goats.
We want to organize this in a specific way. So we thought everyone likes top lists, right? Or I think that's the way that people work. I have no idea. I never get out. But we decided to organize this into a top 5 neutral cards list. And this is something that I worked out with ADWCTA ahead of time. And we were like, okay, let's sort of come to agreement on this. But you'll see later on in our later top 5 list for classes that there's going to be a surprise factor. So it's going to be a surprise for you guys as well as for us. But ADWCTA, now that I've introduced it, why don't you tell people about the 5 cards we're going to be talking about right now?
Okay, the 5 cards we're going to be talking about right now are going to be, and we'll just, like, we're not going to talk about the tier list, like, values of, you know, all these cards or anything, but we'll start here, because these are the neutral cards. They are going to define the meta, and so I think it's only fair that we kind of talk about it. The first card, the number 1 card, the absolute best card, is going to be a Bog Creeper. Hands down, not even close to any other card that has been released here. In fact, it is so good that it is the exact same score as a Shredder at 78.
Wow, it's been decided, guys. It's been said.
Mm-hmm.
So should we stop here and talk about this, or should we first introduce the other 4 cards and then?
No. Let's talk about the Bog Creeper. Let's go card by card, one by one, down the list.
With Bog Creeper, here's the thing that stands out the most, and it's a little bit surprising because when I thought about it, it really hit home for me. Bog Creeper is significantly bigger than the biggest common taunt, right?
Yes.
Because when you think about taunts in the arena, like
the biggest common taunt being like Fen Creeper.
Exactly. It's a Fen Creeper. So you're thinking of like, well, in terms of commons, which really define the arena meta, right? It's like, what's the biggest taunt? It is a freaking, Fen Creeper. That's typically picked. Yep. You know, you can also see like Mogushan Warden sometimes, but like
Mogushan Warden is not bigger than a Fen Creeper.
It's not bigger. Well, I mean, the health is pretty big.
No, but, it is lamer. It is lamer. It is not bigger.
But when you have a card that is like really properly statted and you really like a 6/8, right? Like that's just a really good distribution. And taunt, suddenly, basically like all of these classes have a sort of druid effect, right? Where, you know, you have this stuff on the board. And if you look at Ironbark Protector, what is so good about that card, right? Because it is like pretty much like properly statted, if a little understated, because it's a class card. Why is it so powerful of an effect? It's because the taunt is so good at that stage of the game, right? It is really good. And obviously it dies at these hard removals. But now everyone can have this sort of druid effect. And then you have this Bog Creeper. And the option before was always just to go.
What is a Bog Creeper?
Oh, what is a Bog Creeper? That is a very good question.
For our listeners who have endured the last 3 minutes of our talking without necessarily, they get a sense of what Bog Creeper is, but I feel like we skipped a step here.
I just got too excited, you know? Bog Creeper is a common neutral card, 7 mana for a 6/8 taunt.
Yeah.
Pretty simple, right? There's nothing particularly sexy about this card. If you look at its stats, you know, it's sort of missing perhaps 1 stat, right, from the vanilla stat distribution.
But it has taunt.
It has
taunt. Senjin's missing 1 stat. No one hates on Senjin for it.
Exactly. And this is so important for the late game, just because now you have a taunt that can compete with the big stuff, right? The problem with Fen Creeper is it's a big taunt in terms of it's big relative to all of the other taunts, but it's not big compared to the actual large drops in the game or the
Yep.
mid-sized drops in the game, right?
And what happens when you add a big taunt into the meta, like with any class, right? Like what happens when someone drafts a Sunwalker and puts it on the board? The opponent freaks out.
Yep.
The opponent doesn't know what to do. The opponent is put in an awful position, almost regardless of what's happening on the board. No one ever wants to see a Sunwalker, and a Bog Creeper is going to be along those lines because you're now going to have to kind of prepare for a Bog Creeper in all classes, like an Iron Forge,
Iron Forge, yes.
Iron
Go
Fur,
on.
Grizzly. No, Iron Bark. Oh man, this
Iron
game has so
Bark,
many
what?
irons.
Finish it.
Dark Iron Skulker. So the Iron Bark Protector is turn 8. This starts at turn 7. It's going to appear because it's so. One of the things is the higher a card is rated on a tier list, like the better people think a card is, they're going to pick it more often, right? So you're going to see it more often. So a Bog Creeper is actually going to be seen, I would expect, even when facing Druids, at almost the same rate. Because it also has an offering bonus of what I'm going to assume to be 33%. It could be only 25%. Blizzard didn't really announce it yet. But it's going to be seen almost that frequently. And you always prepare for what if the Druid drops an Ironbark, right? Like, that's just something everyone does. Yep. So now you have to, and no one prepares what if someone drops a Shredder, because there's no way anyone deals with a Shredder in any way. But you sometimes prepare for a Kraken for the same reason. So now you prepare for a Bog Creeper by turn 7. You have to know how to deal with it. Because if you don't deal with it, so many bad things happen. Like, you can just lose 3 cards to this card immediately, right?
Right. Because if you think about it, a lot of the times, what would you do on turn 6? A very common play on turn 6, if you don't have Boulderfist Ogre, or if you don't have a premium 6, which, let's face it, premium 6s are, not that common, you drop like a 4 and a 2, right? And before, you could drop the 4 and the 2 without thinking of anything, because you're like, oh, nothing, there's nothing special about turn 7 particularly, right? Especially nothing special in terms of a taunt that stops you from going face.
Well, the special thing's Flame Strike.
Yeah, especially, well, then you drop, your Yeti and your 2 and it's still fine. But
but it's not fine anymore, is it?
Your thought process is a lot different now. You're like, well, if I drop a 4/5 and a 3/2, I still need a ping to get my 2 cards.
And if I drop a 4/5 and a 2/3, oh, I'm just dead.
Yeah, you're just dead. Like, what do you do, right? And that's a terrible feeling. It's fine if you have the Hex or if you have the Polymorph in your hand, but if you don't, you're like, well, maybe I should play something different this turn, right? Like, maybe instead of a 4 and a 2, maybe if I have 2 3 drops with 4 attack, maybe I should just play those in anticipation, right?
The game is just going to be much more strategic.
It's very different now.
It was the case where you drop a Pit Fighter, it gets assassinated. It's just kind of how it works, right? Because you need the tempo. Well, now if you assassinate that and they drop a Bog Creeper, which is highly likely, you're screwed. You've lost. So do you assassinate the Pit Fighter? Do you just wait until the Pit Fighter clears one of your minions? It only has 6 health. You can then clear it with another minion.
Yeah. So this is going to be one of those meta defining, or a very big effect on the meta that really isn't that exciting, right? But that's what the arena is. It's like a lot of strategy, but it doesn't necessarily revolve around combos, right? It's these sort of solid cards that force people to play around them that will have the biggest impact. So welcome to the Bog Creeper meta, guys.
Yep, welcome to the Bog Creeper meta. So, what is the Bog Creeper meta?
It is... All right, so I guess one adjective you can use is, it's going to be a little bit slower, right? It's going to be a little bit slower if we just focus on Bog Creeper, because point of acceleration in the game, one of the defining moments of any game is sort of, you have 2-3 minions on the board, they drop something big like a Force Tank Max, right? Or a Boulderfist Ogre. Now, what is your choice? A lot of times, I would say 90% of the time, your choice is go face, You're like, well, okay, I'm not trading into that thing because I don't want to just reward him for putting down something big, right? You want to punish someone for putting down something big. Bog Creeper doesn't allow you to do that. So one important point of acceleration in the game has been taken away. And that, so, you know, you can talk about sort of the stuff that happens before then, but I want to focus on that point right now and just say that, like, by taking that away, you're automatically adding like 2-3 turns to the end of quite a few games. So that's one distinct difference right there.
Mm-hmm. Yep. The turns. You get more turns, you get more cards, you have more things to play, you can afford to play bigger minions, which is nice because Bot Creeper is one of those bigger minions, and everything kind of works out. The other thing with taunts is that when you taunt and you don't get face damage, you can set up for a lot more board clears a lot more easily. Now, normally you think, well, I play a Bog Creeper, they throw all their minions into me, and then, you know, how is that helpful for a board clear, right? I've just given them a target. What I want to do is play like a Tiger, right? And then I Flame Strike. Well, no, if you play a Bog Creeper, a lot of times what the opponent really actually wants to do is to just drop more minions and not attack. Because your Bog Creeper still only has one attack. It's still going to take a little while to clear their minions, and they can have a better trade onto your Bog Creeper, right, than what they had before. So they may actually just play into your board clears more. I think that's going to happen a decent amount of times, especially because there's not, like, a few classes aside, the board clears just got diluted even further, right? Like, it just keeps getting diluted. Priest is the only one that's, like, getting more board clears, and, like, maybe Warlock. Everyone else, as far as their normal board clears go, like Consecrations are going to get seen way less, right? Like compared to Classic. It's just, I so infrequently play around Consecration on turn 4 already, and I'm going to play around it even less. That it's just it's hard. It's generally not a card you keep in your opening hand, and it's hard to draw it at that point if you even have it. And like less than I don't know, like maybe like 60% of decks, Paladin decks have a Consecration, if that. I'm trying to think back to my Paladin decks. I definitely have had it in less than half of my Paladin decks.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's an interesting relationship, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you're playing against a class that has AoE, a lot of times you're forced into playing into it more often, right? And at the same time, it's less offering rate, but the value of it will increase because of these situations. So, you know, it might come to a situation in which it's sort of the do or die, the boom or bust, where if you get these if you get these AoE clears, your deck is just much better. Or if you get these hard removals, if hard removals are premium, then your deck is much
premium.
better.
Super premium. Oh man, if I could hex a Bot Creeper.
There you go.
There's gonna be some feel good moments in Whispers of the Old Gods. It's gonna mostly involve Bot Creepers, and it's gonna involve you playing them and your opponent conceding, or your opponent playing them, you hard removing it, and your opponent conceding. Those are gonna be the Whispers of the Old God moments that we tell our children.
Eminently exciting and interactive.
So there's something about Whispers of the Old God, right? Like, no matter how you spin it and how you look at the cards, it doesn't look terribly exciting. The cards themselves look very vanilla. There are no new mechanics, you know, they're just kind of different iterations of things we've all seen before. Most of them aren't even things that we've seen before in expansions. They're things that were like if this card came out in Nax, I would have been like, okay. And that was like 4 expansions ago. So there's nothing terribly exciting about the cards that are coming out. What's exciting in Whispers of the Old Gods is that when the meta shifts, the whole game is different. You look at every single interaction, and you look at every single card and how you play every single thing and what you keep on your mulligans and how you structure your curve. You view all of that different when the meta changes. And the meta is going to change because of Bog Creeper. And that'll bring me to the next card. But I want to get a point out, because I get this comment sometimes in my video review series, because I stress this point like I punch this point every single video. So I've done it like 12 times already. And people were like, all right, I think you're exaggerating just how much things are going to change. And to those people I say, were you here when GVG happened? Were you here when TGT happened? Because if you were, you'll know that this is not a joke. This is not an exaggeration. Metas change and everything is different. And we may have a short memory, and we may be thinking about OE, which was still a significant shift in the meta. But this is going to be way bigger.
Wow.
And at the same time, oh, sorry, you want to?
I was like, well, look, ADWCTA is basically saying, do you guys think this is a game? Because it is
No, this is
not.
not a game.
No, obviously not.
When your opponent drops a bog creeper and you're like, oh crap, I wasn't preparing for that, this stops being a game. This just becomes a very painful experience that will cost you gold. What is more important, what is also important, is the other side of it, right? Which is that when we say the meta is going to change, we're talking about the meta is going to change by 1.5 to 2 turns. So it is not the case that all of a sudden magically every class is going to have a bunch of board clear, tons of 8 drops, and the meta is going to become just about who has more cards in the end. That's not what's going to happen. What's going to happen is like, let's say half the aggro decks disappear. Let's say they were 30% of the meta, now they're 15% of the meta. Let's say mid-range was like 50% of the meta, now they're like 45% of the meta. And now control, which used to be like 10% of the meta, is now like 20% of the meta, right? Like, you just double the amount of control decks you face. If you had a deck that couldn't deal with a control deck before, you take 1 loss, you take maybe 2 losses, you'll still get like 8-9 wins, no problem, right? Even if you face your average amount of control decks, and even if you have a 0% chance of beating a control deck. But you turn that up to 20%, now your deck is getting stopped at 4 or 5 wins. That's a huge difference. You have to draft around that. You have to play around that. You have to do everything around that, and that's how the meta changes.
All right. Well, this is I'm shocked by how many people think that this is a game. I'm sorry that that they think this way.
Every time I hear people talking about this as a game, it triggers me.
Well, now you guys know how to trigger ADWCTA. All right. Should we move on to the other 4 cards? Wow.
Other 4 cards? What? No. It's all about the Bog Creeper. I know we said top 5, but we really meant like Bog Creeper picked 5 times.
Bog Creeper and buddies. Well, this is this segment. Bog Creeper and buddies. Okay.
His other buddy Bog Creepers.
Do you want to move on to the buddies?
All right. Let's move on to the first buddy. These are in no particular order, but they are the 4 next highest rated cards in the common neutrals. So we'll go by theme here. Bog Creeper has a buddy. It is another big taunt. So lest you think, oh well, Bog Creeper is just 1 card. Yeah, you may see it almost as much as an Ironbark, but how many Ironbarks do you really see even when facing Druids? It's not that many. Fine. Introducing Psychotron. Psychotron is a 5-mana 3/4 taunt divine shield, which is like a Sunwalker with -1/-1, and it comes out a turn earlier. Psychotron trades well with everything. Psychotron gets a 3-for-1 if you have an aggro deck. Psychotron is a mech to trigger random synergies that you do not want to trigger. Psychotron, this does mean that Psychotron can come out on turn 4, and if you draft Psychotron, Psychotron has a very good chance of winning you the game.
If you're interested in what Psychotron has to offer, please send 3 easy installments of $19.95 to Hearthstone, Whispers of the Old Gods. I think that was what you were going for.
I mean, I'm trying to do a sales pitch on this. I think some people are... I had to talk you up. I remember this. I had to talk you up on Psychotron.
You did. So we had a discussion about Psychotron, and look, there are similarities in the end with Sunwalker, right? And we know the value of Sunwalker, and we know sort of the how Sunwalker fits into the meta. And if you think about, like, even for ping classes, right? This is 5 mana, Sunwalker is 6 mana. It's +1/+1, which is exactly what you would expect. If you ping a Sunwalker, they basically played a taunt Yeti, right? If you ping this, you basically played a taunt spider tank.
It's called a monkey.
It is a monkey. Sure, you played a
mechanical monkey.
Okay, you played
which is kind of what that thing looks like.
Which is or you could just say a taunt spider tank, and that's fine. Regardless, I did have to be talked into this because I think there is something very important and distinct between the 3/4 body and the 4/5 body, right? And I think you would agree with it as well, but I was hung up on it a little bit. In the end, though, I think you're right. Like, this thing is very powerful, and like the one.
And it fits the theme. If you want a Bog Creeper, then you want a Psychotron.
Yeah, that's very true. But yeah, I mean, I think this card is also going to have a distinct, leave a distinct impression on the meta, and you're going to see it a lot because it will create those situations where, you are forced to slow down or you have to inefficiently trade, right?
Yep.
Especially for
And this
non-ping
isn't even
classes.
something that, yeah, this isn't even something you
Yeah.
could, like, frostbolt or fireball or whatever. You gotta ping it first.
Yeah. And if you ping it, you're just playing a premium 3-drop.
Yeah.
That's
And
that's
if you're a
that's
warrior, you just concede when they play this. I'm completely serious. Like, the warrior got all these great cards, and people were like, "Oh my god, warrior's so good," and I'm like, it could be, or people can just draft a lot of cyclotrons, and then you're dead. Like, it doesn't matter how good your cards are. You can't deal with cyclotron. You can't deal with sunwalker. You can't really even deal with sludge belcher.
Right. So, another addition to the taunt meta and one of the bog creeper buddies. Should we move on to the next
coin cyclotron?
Next bog creeper buddy?
Next bog creeper buddy. Well, okay, these guys are gonna get like less and less buddy with bog creeper because they're gonna not all taunt, and I don't think bog creeper.
Whoa. You don't have to be a
buddies
taunt to be friends with.
Really?
Dang. What are you?
Really? You don't think bog creeper only accepts friends who are taunts?
Wow, I would like to think that the bog creeper is more open-minded than that. Right?
I don't know about that. He's a bog creeper.
Look, you don't know anything about bog creeper. You haven't met him yet. He comes out on Tuesday. All right. Don't make assumptions about bog creeper before he's joined this world. Okay.
All right. Well, okay. Going down. We went with a 7-drop, then we had a 5-drop. Now let's go to a 4-drop. That is also a, I guess, buddy of Bog Creeper. It is an Aberrant Berserker. Aberrant Berserker, 4 mana, 3/5, Enrage, +2 attack. Blizzard showing the world that yes, they still realize Enrage is a mechanic in this game. And even though they have not published an Enrage card since Classic, they have not withdrawn support for it. It is alive and well. And this is an Aberrant Berserker, and it is not just alive and well, it is a damn good card.
Yeah. So this is an interesting discussion I had with ADWCTA because
you hit 3/5s, and you're just heavily prejudiced against 3/5s. Even if it turns into something that is not a 3/5.
I think we will admit that the effect is...
It can never get rid of being a 3/5. To Merps, its soul will always be a 3/5, and that taints it for its entire duration.
It does.
Existence in the game.
And this is something we also changed in the tier list, right? We also recognize the fact that 3/5s are just...
We bumped 3/5s down by like 4 points every 3/5.
We did, because we recognize its sort of inefficiency with dealing with a 4/5, although that's not terrible, but it just gets slaughtered by 5/4s, right? Like absolutely destroyed. And yes, you can make it up with a ping, but that means you are spending 2 more mana to get rid of it than your opponent, which is like, I mean, that's kind of the same as your 4-drop getting eaten by a 2-drop or your 4. Like it's just very bad in terms of tempo and game losing at certain situations. So that sort of held back my initial admiration of this card. But I think ADWCTA sort of talked me into it, like just based on these different situations that you will get. And the fact that the 5 health is very relevant to activating the 2 Enrage, right? So in the end, like I do have...
This is not a Tauren Warrior.
It is not a Tauren Warrior. MVP, definitely. But we are going to see this card quite a lot. And I think that the situation... Like, obviously, you don't want to see it up against an Evil Heckler or a Lost Tall Strider. But in those other situations, I think it can prove to be quite a good card. Just because... And this is something that ADWCTA reminds me a lot of. You don't always play these cards on curve, right? Like
you usually don't.
You usually don't play a 2-drop on turn 2. You want to play a 2-drop, but if you're looking at a specific 2 cost card, you're usually not playing that card on turn 2, and you usually don't play this on turn 4 as well. And even if you do, the only situation in which it's really bad is up against a 5/4, and the upside is very real. So
yeah. And the slower the game is, the less likely you are to play it on turn 4, right? The more likely it's going to be top deck later. Okay, so that's an Aberrant Berserker. I think Merps outlined my case for it very well. And so I'm looking forward to playing with this card. This is a fun card. This is also a card that has a lot of strategy involved in it. So it's a deceptively simple card, but it is very powerful. And we can move on to another buddy if you insist that this is Bog Creeper's buddy. Polluted Hoarder. There's going to be a theme, by the way, with all these cards. I think Bog Creeper aside, pretty much all these other cards I've had to like talk Merps up. And that's not because when me and Merps discuss, I get my way. It's more because Merps literally hates on every single card. And so only the cards in which I get through to Merps on make it into this like top list.
There are certain cards. Look, I can probably name on one hand the list of cards that I was higher than ADWCTA. And to be fair, I was typically right, like on those, but very small sample size. But I was right. Those would be like I remember I really liked Zombie Chow and Flame Cannon.
Yes.
Right? Yes. I also liked Argent Horse Rider a lot more than you, although you kind of just like.
No, I think I was just off on the like. I hated it more than most people.
Right. And past those, I'm just like I don't really. I did love Keeper of Oldemon. Right. Like,
well, okay. I think we all love Keeper of Oldemon.
Yeah. But I think
and
those
loved being like hated.
And then basically, other than that, like all the other cards, I was like, nope, hate it.
Just like down the list. I'm like, oh come on. All right. Well, Polluted Hoarder is one of those cards I had to talk up a little bit. And it's really going to come in connection with a Gnomish Inventor change as well, because we all agree that Polluted Hoarder is better than a Gnomish Inventor just because of the stat distribution is going to outweigh the fact that it's a Death Rattle draw. So Polluted Hoarder, if you don't know by now, is a 4-mana 4/2 Death Rattle draw card. It was one of the first cards revealed in TGT, and at the time no one was terribly excited about it because we were all like, oh yeah, it's going to be a good card. That hasn't really changed, except we found out what the rest of the set was, which is like boring vanilla cards, some of which are powerful but most of which are eh. So now Polluted Hoarder, looking back on it, looks pretty good.
Yeah.
And we're going back to what we were saying before, right? Card draws favor good players. Slower games favor good players. Having more options to do things favors good players. So cards that kind of draw a card are getting a tiny bump in the tier list, mostly as a result of reevaluating the whole thing because we had to look at Polluted Hoarder.
Yeah. So Polluted Hoarder is a card that it works both ways, right? So it benefits from a slower meta, but it also creates a slower meta. So it's these sort of cards in which you really get this effect, and you get it with just good value cards or high score cards. You know, if we're talking about the tier list, for example, like if you have these slow cards that are very low or even average on tier list, you won't see it. But if you see stuff like the Bog Creepers and the Polluted Hoarders, like they bring each other up as well. Sometimes you just have one card that sort of has a seismic shift, right? Like a Kraken. Like that's what we saw with the Kraken. You know, Kraken did get help with other factors and other cards, but Kraken itself, because it was so good, it sort of shifted the meta almost by itself. And Polluted Hoarder doesn't exactly do it by itself. You know, it's not that powerful.
But it's buddies.
But it's buddies, yes. The Bog Creeper buddies all help each other out and all pull the meta in one way. And by them pulling the meta in one way, they help each other because they reinforce what makes these cards good in the first place. So that's what
we were talking about. Yeah, and so I was talking about earlier, like that the cards that are rated higher get picked more often because people just think they're better. But it doesn't even need to do this for Whispers of the Old God. Like, I looked down the entire list, including epics and rares, just like everything, right? And I tried to find cards that I can convince myself was as good as aggro as control. And the number was 4 out of, I don't know how many cards there are in the whole entire neutral set, but there's a lot of cards. So this isn't just Bog Creeper and his highly rated friends, it's Bog Creeper and all of his buddies from every part of the spectrum in this Whispers of the Old God release. They are all control, slow, or just like big, or healing, or, you know, taunting, all that stuff.
Yep. All right. So
last buddy?
Last buddy. This is your favorite buddy.
This is one of my favorite buddies. It is the Nerubian Prophet. This is one of my favorite buddies of Bog Creeper. I don't know if he's buddies with Bog Creeper, but you can insist. It is a 6-mana 4/4, and that sounds like it's really bad. But its ability is at the start of your turn, reduce this card's cost by 1. And so if you have it in your opening hand, like if you don't draw it as your first draw, if you have it in your mulligan or a card that you get from the mulligan, you will be able to play this as a 4/4 on turn 3.
That's pretty good. That's really good.
Mm-hmm.
You know, people, Ogre Brute is a premium 3-drop, right? And it is a card that screws you over sometimes because it just attacks the wrong thing. This is a card in which we fought over as well, but I think ADWCTA explained it very well. And I'm going to ask you to explain it to our audience as well. So basically, my hang up on this, I'm just like, it's really awkward for those midterms, right? Like you pointed out this sort of upside. You have it in your mulligan or your like, you know, like either before you mulligan or after you mulligan, and it's fantastic. Its value is through the roof because you can play as a 3-mana 3/3. But I'm like, what if you draw it on like turn 2, right?
Mm-hmm.
So educate us. Tell us what happens then.
Okay, so if you draw it on turn 2, this card is a dead card in your hand for 2 turns. You are not playing a 4/4 for 6. You are not playing a 4/4 for 5. Then the turn after that, on your third turn of having this card, so you've only had a dead card for 2 turns, which is not great, but it's not going to kill you most times, you will have a 4-mana 4/4. And that's totally a playable card. It's not good. If you had other choices, you would not play this card because it's going to gain you a mana every turn you let it stay in your hand. But if you had to, if you had nothing else to play, for example, or if you need some way to fit in the combination of cards, a 4-mana 4/4 is not the end of the world by a long shot. And if you could just wait one more turn, then it's a 3-mana 4/4 again. And if you could just keep doing other stuff, it eventually becomes freer or whatever. And if you top deck it in the late game, it's still just a 4/4, which is a totally average card. Because at that point, you don't care how much mana it costs. So you're only losing on it if you draw it in your mid-game range, and you're only losing the flexibility of having a playable card for 2 turns.
Yeah, and that's something that I think ADWCTA is really good at like looking at. So with these cards, and I've seen sort of the Twitch and Reddit analysis of just cards in general, right? Where it is very easy as a just as a player of the game to be skeptical of these cards and be like, all right, what are some bad situations with these cards and how bad are they, right? And you look at these bad situations and you're like, oh, okay, that's pretty bad. So that means this card is pretty bad, right? And it's a way to evaluate, but
Dies to BGH, literally unplayable.
I mean, that's basically it. Like, I think that is 80% of like, with any big card, it's like dies to BGH, period. It's like
done. Analysis over.
Yep, analysis over. It's like, and if you say anything more, it's like, what? BGH?
Yeah, why are you talking?
Why? Yeah, exactly. Which is part of the reason why people like wrote off Dr. Boom, right?
Yeah.
But you want to also look at, okay, what are the possible situations? So when is it good versus when is it mediocre versus when is it bad? What are the percent chances of all of them? And then what are the effects of each one, right? And that is a very nuanced way of looking at these. And sort of like, so, you can focus, if you were the eternal optimist, you could focus on the fact that this card, the Nerubian Prophet, has great upside if you get it in your mulligan, right? Or if you're the pessimist, you could say, no, you're going to draw it on turn 3 and you won't be able to play it for a long time. And then, you look at it in different situations like, well, what if you top deck it in the late game? Then it probably doesn't matter. And then out of all these things put together, you're like, this is pretty decent, mostly because it has a profound effect, and the awkwardness in the middle turns, you really only just have to wait one turn and then it becomes a playable card, right? Not something that is going to blow you away, but it still becomes playable. And then balance with the upside, you're like, yeah, the upside is really good. So, yeah.
So that's the meta. You guys know the meta now. We can end the podcast.
Yeah, perfect. Maybe we could get some of this sleep that we keep on talking about.
Yeah. I think the key part about the meta, besides the whole taunt thing, slow thing, all these, we just gave you the top 5 cards. The one more important thing is that these are all like 4 mana, 5 mana, 6 mana, 7 mana, right? Like Nerubian Prophet is situationally playable on turn 3, but other than that, it's still it's basically not playable until later on, right? Because it's stuck in your hand for 2 turns. So these aren't really curve cards in the early game, right? These aren't 2-drops. These aren't 3-drops. We don't have a Flame Juggler. We're not getting an Argent Horse Rider. We're not getting I don't know what other good drops that they've added in the recent expansions have been, but there's a lot of cards that have been added, and some of them were from expansions, and there are 2-drops and 3-drops. Well, we didn't get any of that this round.
No. And it also reinforces, one of the themes that we see, right? Like, your curve is going to be awkward, definitely. And if you look at all of these cards, what are sort of the most powerful cards, right? The most powerful cards, and especially in like the cards that we've highlighted, they are pretty heavy cards, right?
Yep.
Bog Creeper, 7 mana, Nerubian Prophet, it changes. It could just be the cheapest, the most tempo efficient card if you just keep it in your hand. But let's say it's a mid-sized card, right? Cyclotron, 5 mana, Berserker 4, Polluted Hoarder 4. It's not a coincidence, I think, from a design perspective, that these are sort of the cards that we are seeing that are going to define the meta, right, and make the biggest impact. You do have smaller cards, right? One of the cards that I want to point out is something like Zealous Initiate, right? Which is a 1 mana 1/1 with Death Rattle. Give a random friendly minion +1/+1. It's a small card, but it still fits into this slower, this slower meta, right? Like, what are you trying to do with this minion? You're trying to plan. You're trying to sort of make the board awkward for your opponent. You're trying to set something up, right? So all of this planning, and also Tentacle of N'Zoth, which is the 1 mana 1/1 Death Rattle, deal 1 damage to all minions.
Sheep.
It's a mini sheep, right? So these two 1-drops, if you look at them, they aren't true ones in the fact that they have they sort of just have the 1-drop stat and maybe like a beneficial effect or a small beneficial effect, right? These are plan like turn planning cards and also sort of board affecting cards, right? So even the smallest common neutrals for this expansion want you to focus on trading on the board and setting up the board. So we definitely see the direction that it's going. And because of this, it's like, these are not great curve cards, right? The Zealous Initiative is definitely better than a Tentacle of N'Zoth, but like, you're going to see across the spectrum, you're really missing power cards on curve. So they're still going to be in the meta. Like, you're still going to have like, for example, Flame Jugglers and Huge Toads, but none of them were released, right? So are you going to pick a Duskboar, like the 2 mana 4/1?
Hey, that is the only super aggro card in this entire set. We are not making fun of Duskboars. He is majestic, and he stands alone.
He doesn't
care
alone.
what anybody thinks about him or what this set is about.
He is going to do proud, his independent thing. Boar that doesn't care.
That dies instantly.
To be fair, it also highlights how bad Magma Rager is. Every single card that comes out is like, wow, Magma Rager is really bad. But yes.
Okay, I have a bigger problem than like Duskboar. I have a problem with Biofin Tidehunter. It's a 2 mana 2/1, right? That generates a 1/1. So it's like a Murloc Tidehunter. It's also a Murloc, right? And it's kind of power creep in that it has a 1/1 taunt, but that's not what I'm annoyed by it. It means that this Murloc Tidehunter replaced his fellow Murloc with an Ooze.
Oh man, well, it got corrupted. It's not thinking for itself. It obviously, it's corrupted.
Like, that's every time I play that card, that's all I'm going to be able to think about.
It tossed away its buddy for an Ooze.
Yeah. And its Ooze is only like a tiny bit better than its buddy, right? It's not like he gained a lot of stuff with it, right?
It got corrupted.
Like, look at the other things that get corrupted. A corrupted Hoarder got like +2/+1, right? Like, okay, right? You got to take a good deal. If you're going to be corrupted, you got to get something for it. Look at the corrupted heal bot, right? It went from a 3/3 to a 6/6 in exchange for healing the wrong guy. This guy got nothing. The Biofin Tidehunter, that was not good. It makes me sad on many different levels.
Wow. Yeah, that's true. Wow, way to dampen the mood on this stream. Thank you. Thank you so much.
We'll get into it more. Okay, let's go on to our next topic. Let's move on from the sadness that is the Biofin Tidehunter, and you're gonna see it in the meta too, because it's like one of the only 2-drops that actually came out.
Yep.
Okay, so let's talk about the top 5 class cards.
Okay, so
what class cards do you like? This is not necessarily the top 5 class cards.
Right. So basically, these are the top 5 class cards that we like and we're interested in seeing. And, the parameters could be the most meta impacting, right? Or the card that we think is just the most interesting.
Yeah.
So here's the thing. When we introduced the top 5 neutral cards before, ADWCTA and I had talked about them. We don't know what our lists are for this. So I'm going to introduce mine, and he's going to introduce his inferior list. And then we can talk about why his list is worse than mine. Now, I set some parameters for myself. I didn't. Okay. Another reason my list is better than your list.
I don't think parameters make lists better.
If you love bureaucracy, I don't know. But I wanted to pick common class cards because those are the ones that are really meta defining.
Yeah, that's not what I'm doing.
And I wanted to limit it to 1 per class. Okay.
I did do that. On
purpose or
no, not on purpose. It just so happened.
Okay.
I have 1 per class as well.
All right. Now let's start off with a class that I hold very dear to me, the Hunter. Let's talk about Infested Wolf. Oh wait, that's not a common card. I broke my rule.
This is the very beginning of your list. How do you break your rules already?
Well, we did this in a rush, all right? So I guess I guess this is a.
So you don't. This is on Merps Tree's rules that he makes up for himself when no one told him to make a rule.
I know. I put down a rule and I break it right away. I know. Am I that much of a rebel? I guess I am. Guys. I know. Anyways.
All right. Let's talk about the Infested Wolf.
It is a 4-mana 3/3 beast, and Death Rattle summon 2 1/1 spiders, and those spiders are beasts. So triple beasts.
We've seen triple beast before.
We have seen triple beast in a very loved card from the Hunter class, the Savannah Highmane.
Yep.
Right.
That's a pretty good card.
The Savannah Highmane is just a ridiculous card. And look, we have a mini version of a Highmane, right? And no one is saying that this is as good as a Savannah Highmane because the stat distribution is worse and the effect is much lower, right? But what you do get is a sticky minion that has a lot of stats. And it really sort of, by having 3 beasts on the board, it just opens up a world of possibilities for Houndmasters, for kill commands, for basically all of your synergies.
Yeah,
right?
Look at the card above it. Carry on Grub. Speaking of Houndmaster.
Yeah.
Oh my god. That card just, you see it and it just begs for a Houndmaster if you're an arena player.
Grub is a 3-mana 2/5 beast, vanilla. So it is really good for Hunter because it just curves out well into Houndmaster.
Like a 2/5 is good by itself as a 3-drop, right? Think of Druid of the Flame.
It's almost impossible to get rid of on turn 3. Yeah.
And then you can do stuff with it because it's a beast.
It is a beast. So yeah, like Infested Wolf, it's something that I am really excited about because if you look at sort of the cards that Hunter got, Fiery Bat is one of them, right? It's a 1-mana 2/1 with a Death Rattle, deal 1 damage to a random enemy. So it's got a vanilla body and it has like the huge toad effect, right? So we have a 1-mana drop. We also have a 3-mana drop. We have a flexible little removal, or just
that drops a beast.
Right. So we're talking.
I just found out today that Mastiff is a beast. I said in my video review that it probably wasn't because I don't know what a Mastiff was.
Mastiff. It's a dog.
Oh. Well, the Mastiff is a dog apparently.
Good job.
And if I had known that, I would have known it was a beast.
Sure. So you said it's probably not a beast because you just guessed it wasn't.
Because I saw the name and that didn't look like any beast I knew.
What beast do you know? Okay, you living in New York. What beasts?
There are a lot of dogs in New York. Okay.
Do you actually go out and like research them or
No, I don't. They just lick me. Dogs in New York are like everywhere. It's kind of, they really get in your way as a human being.
Fantastic. We learned all these things about ADWCTA today. But the card that we're talking about is On the Hunt, which is a 1 mana common spell for a hunter, which is deal 1 damage, summon a 1/1 Mastiff, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's an elven archer, essentially. In many ways, it is like an elven archer that is a beast. So one thing that we see for hunters that I think you don't see for a lot of other classes is hunter actually got curve cards. Hunter has
all curve cards.
Curve cards, like in relation to the other classes, got significantly more curve cards than like the other classes, right? It has a 1, it has a 3, and 2s. You know, there's always been a lot of 2s in floating around in the meta. So being able to grab a 1, being able to grab sort of a very resilient 3-drop.
Yep.
And then
it's not like hunters are hurting for 3-drop. They have this card called Animal Companion,
which is pretty good.
Generally good.
But yeah, introducing those and then having the rare be a sticky 4-drop as well. Hunters are one of the only classes that got curve cards.
Yep.
So that is something that I do want to stress. And it is sort of, I wouldn't say the only thing, but it is one of the things that will keep Hunter afloat.
I would say it's the only thing. And I wouldn't say it keeps the hunter afloat, but we'll get into that later. It is the only upside that the hunter got with all the downsides that's about to befall this class. But it is true. But what I'm kind of annoyed about, though, is how Blizzard managed to work spiders into this expansion, too. Like, how many expansions has it been now? Where it's just spiders and spiders and spiders and more spiders, right?
There's a lot of spiders, man.
Yeah. Like, I think even in like TGT, spiders somehow got in there. Like that has nothing to do with spiders. Adventurous spiders, fine. Dragons, I don't know, maybe there's spiders in the cavern. Mechs, I don't know why spiders existed in mech. Like, it's just, I don't know. I haven't played WoW, so I don't know if it's just a WoW thing where they're like obsessed with spiders, but there's so many spiders in Hearthstone.
There are. It's alright.
It confuses me. Like, I don't know. There's as many dogs as there are spiders, I'm pretty sure. And I feel like there should be more dogs than spiders and more other animals.
Hashtag other animals matter.
Birds? Birds are a whole species? No, not species. What do you call it? Like animal type? What do you call those? Like, you have like fish, you have like mammals, you have like birds.
Can we talk about things that we're actually knowledgeable about? And not this?
I'm just saying Blizzard has a problem with birds, all right? Like, you look at the nerfs, right? They're all towards the birds. You got your starving buzzard, nerfed. You got your owl, nerfed. Captain's parrot, nerfed. Lost tall strider, up next. I don't know how they're going to nerf it or why that would ever happen, but you got to go with the theme.
Wow.
It's a pattern, all right? This is what we do. We look for patterns. This is a very clear pattern. Spiders, good. Birds, bad.
I actually have a huge point with this bird thing. Like, I'm surprised at how.
First of all, there's not even that many birds, right? Like, the percentage is ridiculous. There's no hawks, right? Why are there no hawks or eagles or things? They're like normal.
I mean, look.
Animals.
In short, Illuminati confirmed. Blizzard hates birds.
Blizzard hates birds.
We'll leave it at that. Anyways. What okay,
you started with the Infested Wolf and then you decided to do the whole hunter class. That was all you.
That is true. I did decide to do that. Now I would like to wait, so how do you want to do this? I've introduced a card. Do you want to introduce a card or should I go through mine?
I'll do all 5 of my cards and then we'll go back to you. How about that?
That doesn't seem well, I do 1, you do 5,
yeah.
I do 4.
Yeah. Because I have a best list, and my list is you need to do it together. You can't just split it up, right? I don't have this like loose policy like you do, where I could like have all common cards and then start with a rare, and then I don't know. It's not how I do things.
All right, okay, let's hear it.
All right. So the first card that I love in this is Forbidden Ancient. So it is a epic card, and it is a druid card. And it's a 1 mana 1/1 that says Battle Cry. Spend all your mana, gain +1/+1 for each mana spent. So this means at any time you can just spend all of your mana, or you could do something and spend your remaining mana and get a good body out for it. Which means it is a curve play, not a good one, but it is a curve play at every step of the way. And if you wait until it's like 10 mana, you get a 10/10. And at that time, sure, you can have like more efficient use of your mana doing other things. You don't care about how efficiently you use your mana. You just want big stuff out there. So I think Forbidden Ancient is one of the best cards in the entire game, if not the best card in the entire game. We're talking Dr. Boom levels of good.
See, this is where I disagree with ADWCTA, and I think that he's crazy. And we have had this talk, right? Well, we've talked about
generally when I say this card is the best card in the entire game of Hearthstone, including all legendaries, there's a talk coming afterwards.
There is a talk.
Lets me do anything.
Like, oh yeah, that sounds pretty good,
Forbidden Ancient 150. No, we're not doing that.
Look, the fundamental point is like, how much do you value that flexibility, right?
A lot, and like 150 points.
And this is a flexibility we've never seen in Hearthstone before. In terms of, look, you also have the Forbidden Shaping in Priest, right? The one in which...
Oh, you know my list. So that's the second card that I wanted to talk about as one of my favorite cards. It's Forbidden Shaping.
Oh,
and it is a priest card, and it's epic, and it's 0 mana.
I didn't get my thoughts out.
You can talk about both at the same time.
Fine.
And the text is spend all your mana, summon a random minion that costs that much. So again, summoning a random minion, not terribly great, but it costs the same mana, so it could be good. You could get a Yeti on 4, or you can get like a 4/4 again, or you can get something with a battle cry like a Gnomish Inventor that fails. But you can get a lot of cool things, right? And again, curve, always on curve, and you get a 10 mana play later on, or I think 8 mana is the best one. I forget what the analysis was. Anyway, go ahead. You can comment on both of the 150 rated cards in our upcoming tier list update.
Guys, don't worry. I do have a say in this, although it does not seem like that based on this discussion. But I promise you,
we talked about an entire class based on your first card. Okay,
that is true. So comparing these two cards, right? Because I brought Forbidden Shaping into here. This card, the Druid card, you do have the consistency, right? You know what you're getting, and that we touched upon that previously. That is a very powerful effect, because even though you are getting sort of an understated card, that flexibility is so important, and the effect, because you know what it's going to do 100% of the time, that is very important, because you can gamble on a Forbidden Shaping and have spend 5 mana and you just get a Doom Guard, right? Fel Reaver, Doom Guard. These are all great things. Spend 8 mana, get a Tyrion. That's fantastic. But
yes. Oh no, I was gonna try to get a Thaddeus, but he costs 30 mana, I think.
I don't think he costs 30. I think I don't know what Thaddeus costs. Okay, let's not try to get these things. I don't think you can even get him. I think he's like uncollectible or something. Anyways,
well, this doesn't say summon a collectible minion.
You want the flexibility and the consistency, right? I do value the consistency of the Druid card, and it comes down to how much you value the flexibility, right? And ADWCTA obviously values it extremely highly, but it's
also known as appropriately.
It's a very tough card to get down, just because we've never seen something like this before. And in terms of design theory, that's fantastic, right? You want cards like this that really challenge you to think. I'm just like, I have no idea how to value this. Like, what do I base it upon, right? Because See,
that's the difference between you and me. I know exactly how to value this. 150 points. Precisely. Down to the double decimal point.
I guess it's as simple as that, I guess it really is that simple. I'm just not seeing these things that ADWCTA is seeing. And what he's seeing are hallucinations, really. But
I drank the forbidden Kool-Aid.
Yeah. Also known as Coke Zero, I guess. But that sort of is our disagreement. And I think, is there a good answer to this? I don't know if there is, because it's something we can't really base it upon. And it's just me saying no, the flexibility isn't that important. And you saying the flexibility is that important. Yep. So, and this is so meta defined, right? Even if we say the meta is going to be slower, it doesn't really sort of shape the exact shape. No, pun, nah, get it? Okay. Anyway,
when can you have a card that can be a curve card, and it can be a filler card in your curve, and it can be a 10 mana card? When? Never. Because that would be so OP that it shouldn't be in the game. like these cards.
But yeah, anyways, look out for this. This is a card that we'll continue to discuss, and I don't know if it's. I still don't know where it's gonna go. So yeah.
All right. Well, okay. I've put my ideas out there that it's a 150. We'll see where it ends up after me and Merps haggle over this one. Sometimes it just ends up like this. I feel like 75 to 85% of the cards we basically end up within 2 points of each other, and then some cards it's just like it's just horse trading because you can't peg it to anything, and it's just like I think it'll do good. No, I think it'll do bad. And this is going to be one of them. But hey, Merps, even you will agree this is like at least a 100.
Yeah,
at least a 90.
I do. The flexibility is very strong, and I think we're around that range.
Yeah.
Right?
Okay.
Your score is ridiculous, and I think you will even relent, and we'll work this out. This is something
I just want to make it clear to everybody that these are better than Dr. Boom's.
We just got to move on. Okay. I have
so my third card is Forbidden Ritual, which is a rare card that's a 0 mana, and its text is it's a warlock spell, and it says spend all of your mana and summon that many 1/1 tentacles.
What?
So that's a really good card because it has the flexibility of being many tentacles or of just getting a couple tentacles to fill in the gaps, right? But I think the important thing to know about Forbidden Ritual and why I like it is that it is not as good as the other two Forbidden cards. It's limited because your board only has 7 spaces. So at most you can only get 7 tentacles, and that's a significant limit, right? Like if the other Forbidden cards are limited at 7 mana, that would be somewhat problematic as well.
I feel like you're trolling me here.
I'm just telling you about the cards I'm most interested in. That was the okay. So the fourth card I'm most interested in. Do you want to take a guess? It's Forbidden Flame. It is a mage card, and it is an epic, and it costs 0 mana. And it reads: spend all of your mana, deal that much damage to a minion. See, this is not capped by the amount of space you have on the board, but it can't go face, right? So you're just removing a minion, and if you want to remove a big minion, it actually costs like some insane amount of mana, right? Like if you want to remove like a bog creeper, this costs 8 mana, and that's like a really inefficient removal. This isn't like, with the forbidden minion druid guy, forbidden ancient, that you're like losing like half a mana's worth of stats. This isn't like with Forbidden Shaping, where you have some RNG that can like give you more or less 1 mana. Forbidden Flame is going to cost you like 3 extra mana to do a hard removal, right?
Okay.
So it's really good that you can have like a 1 mana ping anytime. You can have like a 3 mana removal. You can have all this stuff. It's still very flexible. It's still incredibly good. You're probably going to pick it every time it's offered. But it's not a Forbidden Ancient, and it's not a Forbidden Shaping. I still think it's better than Forbidden Ritual, though. I don't know, because Forbidden Ritual is just like 1/1s. It's not the best thing, right? There's so many things that like kill all the 1/1s on the board.
That's true. Forbidden Ritual doesn't have initiative. This does. Let's go on to your last card.
And my last card is a Paladin card. I'm kidding, man. I'm kidding. But I don't care about Forbidden Healing. There is another Forbidden card. It is Forbidden Healing. It's 0 mana Paladin spell. Spend all your mana. Heal for double the mana you spend. You could heal like your opponent's face, your face, a minion. But like that's not terribly interesting. That's just like any healing card, right? With the potential of healing a ton for your own face. So it's better than other healing cards. But whatever, right? That's not terribly important. What I really enjoy is going back to the Hunter, Call of the Wild. How good of a card is Call of the Wild?
Ridiculous.
Right?
Whatever. I mean, look, this score is going to be incredible. Wow.
Yeah, like a 150. Call of the Wild, 8 mana.
Ridiculous.
Summon all 3 animal companions. That's 3 beasts all at once. It's not even like the wolf, where you gotta like hide 2 beasts in.
Every time you've thrown out a score, it's been a 150.
Okay, look, I'm just trying to get one of these to 150, okay? Remember, we're haggling here. The more I throw out there, the more chances I'm going to get a 150 to stick. So in Call of the Wild, you get a 5 damage charger in Huffer. You get a 5/4 taunt. in Misha, and then you get a 2/4 Leok that buffs the rest of your board and is protected by a taunt. You really, like, this should be like 12 mana.
It's ridiculous. I can't believe it is less than 10 mana, right? In which, because if you play this, you get everything. You get buffs on the board in terms of initiative. You get a taunt, and you get a 5 damage charge. And you get multiple bodies. There is nothing bad about this card. Even if you say, well, look, all 3 bodies can get flame striked, you are getting at minimum 5 damage of initiative before it gets flame striked, which means that even if they flame strike it, you are getting you're getting its value. So there's just not a good answer to it. Like, you can't counterspell. Welcome to the counterspell meta.
If I get that counterspell, I'm gonna insta concede.
Yeah, of course. But this card is stupid. It is so freaking good.
Yeah.
It checks off all the boxes. Like, usually with some cards, you're like, okay.
There's no RNG.
No, there's no RNG. There is, you separate bodies, initiative, taunt, but 3 separate beasts as well. There's nothing bad about this card. It is ridiculous. Yes.
Yeah. So 150. And I just want to wrap up with the theme of my list, which is cards that are worth somewhere around 150 points on the tier list. And it's not usually the case that we get any card that's worth 150 points on the tier list, much less so many. So while you could look at the offerings of Whispers of the Old Gods and say, like, it's not that exciting. There's not really that many like terribly good cards. It's got a lot of vanilla cards, especially in the commons. It's a little boring. It's a little like stable. But there's really like this one insanely creative and insanely good thing being added to the arena. It's just unfortunate that for the most part it's like epic, and you're just not going to see it all that often. But when you do see it, it's going to be game changing, and it's going to be so good. And it's also one of the things where it's not like Call of the Wild, right? Your opponent casts Call of the Wild, you're like, your opponent casts Ancient Shaping for like a 4 mana card. You're not gonna like flip out, because they just spent 4 mana to cast a 4 mana card. You don't realize how much this card is going to help him through his run, right? Like, he doesn't totally screw you over. All this card does is prevent him from ever being screwed over himself. And so, this is genius. It cuts down on the saltiness while increasing the crazy things you can do. Because remember, how else are you going to print a card that's 150 points and then not have the person who this card is played against be like, oh, come on, how did he have that card? Right? Like, how is that at all possibly fair? You can't, right? It's really hard to design that card, and Blizzard managed to do it. Like, that's an insanely high accomplishment. And, I'm very honest about Blizzard's card design, when I like it, when I don't like it. These are amazingly designed cards for the arena, even though they weren't designed for the arena. In the arena, they are just ridiculously good design. And I hope more things like this happen. I don't think it's going to. Maybe they'll round out the other classes with other forbidden cards, but this is possibly the best design that I have seen. I mean, Blizzard comes out with some good designs, right? Like, Discover was a good design. Inspire, for the arena at least, was a decent design, I thought. It created interesting things to happen, but this is by far the best one, and it's a pity it's not as used as the other ones.
Yeah, definitely. All right, so that was an interesting top 5 list.
I think it's a very accurate top 5 list. That's where I went for accuracy.
I thought you were going for 150. Like that if you had a theme, it would be 150, 150, 150,
Sure.
150.
Sure.
Okay, so I get to finish up my list?
Yeah.
So my list is actually.
But please don't take us through like 5 more. I don't know if we have time. This is a 2-hour podcast, but I don't know if we have time to go through 5 more classes, and the death we went over 100.
All right. So next card. Let's thank ADWCTA for his contribution. Can I call it that? To the list. Now, one card I want to focus on is Faceless Summoner, and this is the card that spawned a million Reddit posts. Right. Faceless Summoner.
Instant. This is the only card that ever was created, and then it was all about the arena.
It was. It was.
No one talked about anything else.
So Faceless Summoner is a mage common card, 6 mana for a 5/5 with a battle cry: summon a random 3-cost minion. Right, and this card, when it was revealed, people thought it was ridiculous, right? And they were saying how it's like Blizzard doesn't know what it's doing. No one there plays the arena. And I understand the concern just because it is a very powerful card, right? It is a very, very powerful card for the mage, a class that has sort of, if not been at the top of the meta, been like at least top 3 in the meta.
And the mage is only going to get better, right? Like, think of what taunts do. You can't use the rogue hero power through a taunt. You can't use the druid hero power through a taunt. What can you use through a taunt? The mage hero power.
Right. And if the game is slowing down, the mage hero power in the late game, like the rogue's ping for the early game is much better, right? You get double the amount. But in the late game, the rogue's hero power, you can only hit like 2 things in the late game before you can't hit anymore. But with the mage, you're happy playing into like turn 12, turn 15, turn 20, because you can just keep on pinging and pinging and you never lose life. So Faceless Summoner, I mean, this is also going to impact the meta in terms of, it's a very powerful card, right? Now, it's not going to impact the meta in terms of like a Keeper of Oldemon, right? And the difference is sort of how you play against these classes. Faceless Summoner at the end is a stat stick. It is a very good stat stick, but it is still a stat stick. You can think of it as a super Silverhand Knight, right? And Silverhand Knight is very good. It's a premium, if not pseudo premium card in the arena. So you're definitely going to see the effects being felt here. But at the same time, it's not going to break the meta. It's just very frustrating that Mage gets another powerful card, right?
Yeah.
So
yeah, I mean, that's the key, right? It's not actually breaking the meta. We'll get into cards where it's going to break the meta. But this isn't it. This is not the boogeyman in the arena. This is just a powerful card. And look, the mage is going to still get powerful cards now and then, right? It got one in Conjurer last time. This is not a huge surprise. This is not as good as Conjurer. Like, it did not deserve anywhere near the amount of outrage that was directed at it. Even though other cards may have.
Now, the next 2 cards I want to talk about are more of these sort of meta-defining cards, and I'll sort of explain why. The first one is the Paladin card, and I want to talk about Divine Strength. Okay, Divine Strength. It is a common Paladin card, 1 mana, and give a minion +1/+2.
They misprinted it. It's actually +1/+1. That's what they meant to do.
So
because they considered what the effects of this card would be.
One thing, like whenever we talk about the Paladin, one of the things that we say, like, what's a Paladin's weakness, right? Before LOE, like, Paladins had 2 weaknesses. One was its inability to deal with big guys, right? You could always outdoor Peacekeeper it or Humility, but Humility wasn't a great card. Not a lot of people picked it. And outdoor was a rare, right? And then Keeper of Oldemon showed up. And now it's like turn 6 Boulderfist Ogre. You're like, no, I'd rather play the 4 and the 2. So it changed the way you played against them. Another weakness was Paladin's lack of flexibility, right? In terms of, their power cards. It's like True Silver Champion, it's Blessing of Kings, it's Seal of Champs, and sort of the mana capabilities and sort of how the Paladin is going to play, and you can play around that, right? And it's much easier to prevent or sort of brace yourself for a 4 mana Blessing of Kings than it will be for a 1 mana Divine Strength. And it's the
basically it's the +1 damage. It's the +1 damage, right? Like it's like you added a ping to a Hand of Protection-ish card that's not quite as good as Hand of Protection. It's like, rather than having an Elven Archer just summon a 1/1, it's actually an Elven Archer and also hit something for 1. Like, it does too much, and it is too flexible. And when you're the Paladin, yes, it comes from like the common starting point where you need something to buff for things to happen. But after you get there, now you can do anything. There's no way to play around anything with the Paladin anymore. They kept eating into the space where you should have been safe from the Paladin until there is just nothing left. You can play around the mage. You can play around the rogue. Well, you can't play around the rogue, but you never could play around the rogue. We just kind of gave up with the rogue in the very beginning. But the Paladin was always, it got powerful class cards because that's how the class was designed. But no matter what it did, if you were a good player, you can really limit the damage Paladins do to you. And Seal of Champs really hurt that. And then Oldemon kind of wrecked it. and we're just going down this path where you are not supposed to be able to play around anything the Paladin does.
Right. And we see sort of like the reason it's powerful is because of its flexibility and the fact that a +1/+2 is just enough most of the time, right? It is just enough, and there's no overkill there. And look, a lot of times with Blessing of Kings or Seal of Champs, and you see it more so with Blessing of Kings than Seal of Champs. Like sometimes you have the overkill factor, right?
Yep.
And I'm not saying that it makes Blessing of Kings bad, because if you look at our tier list, it still has a very high score, but it sort of limits the capabilities, right? You pay 4 mana and you have to get this like big buff on this guy, and sometimes you don't need it. Now, Divine Strength, a lot of times, maybe you do want that Blessing of Kings, and maybe you just need the size, but this really gives the Paladin flexibility that I don't think it should have, right?
Nope.
Paladins should always
not
be
have.
powerful, but you should be able to force them into awkward turns by keeping them off the board and sort of being able to predict their turns. By throwing in an effective, look, I'm not saying a +1/+2 is supremely powerful, right?
So here's the thing, right? This is the key. It's not like we're going to go out and rate this card a 10, like a 100 or a 150.
Yeah.
I'm much more annoyed at this card than Forbidden whatever is, even though this card is not a 150. It hurts the game way more than a 150 card does. That's how bad this card is.
Right. So this is something that we want to stress. Like, because we're talking about it a lot, we don't want you guys thinking that like, oh man, like they're going to rate it really high.
It's not.
It's not. Like, but it's not necessarily about the pure rating of the card.
I mean, Oldemon wasn't rated that high.
Right.
Oldemon was like 84?
Right. Like it's an 80. Like Oldemon is 84, but is it one of the most impactful cards in the history of the arena?
Yes, exactly. The history of the arena. It is a more impactful card than 150 rated cards that are coming out right now.
Wait. I gotta give it to you. You are really pushing that. Good job, man.
We'll see when the cards are released if I get my way.
He will not. He will not. Definitely not. But yeah, that's sort of like sometimes when we talk about a card, and I know we're not exactly very specific in pointing it out. Sometimes we talk about a card because it is very high on the tier list, and sometimes we talk about it because it changes the way you play against a class, or it changes the way you play a class, and that's so important to us as players, right? Because that really is like it affects the fundamental ways that we deal with this game. And Adulta and I, we try hard, and like we really want to look into the root of this game. So when something changes it by that much at its core, that's something we're like, oh man.
And they do it to the Paladin of all classes.
And they've been doing it the past 2 expansions, and we're just like, why?
Because it happens now and then with like every class, right? They can't just keep printing cards that are quote unquote good cards in terms of how I'm judging it, by keeping it in their lane. And they've done a good job with this expansion of not like breaking things. They really have. But then they publish this card, right? And it's like all your good work for the Paladin at least just gone away.
Yeah. All right. So.
All right. How many more cards do you have?
I got 2.
All right. What else?
This next card, I think, is similar in the Divine Strength. It's in the Divine Strength category of
Divine Strength category.
Change sort of ways that this class operates. And I want to talk about N'Zoth's First Mate.
Oh, okay? Yes. Let's talk about N'Zoth's First Mate.
Okay.
Did you know N'Zoth's First Mate gives you a weapon?
Good. Thank you. Is that the only okay, I will finish this since that's the only thing you're going to throw out there. N'Zoth's First Mate, a warrior common card. 1 mana, 1/1 pirate. It's a pirate. And the battle cry is equip a 1/3 rusty hook. So it's basically 1 mana, you drop a 1/1, and you get 3/4 of a Knight's Justice, right? So this card is ridiculous. First of all, it will have a high tier score, right?
Really high.
Second of all,
super high.
It does change, like it not only gives warriors a ping, it gives them a ping that persists, and it gives them a flexible ping as well, right? Sort of like, why is Mortal Coil so good for the Warlock?
Yes.
It's so good because number 1, it gives a ping to a non-ping class. And number 2, it just like it smooths out your curve because it's only 1 mana, right? For
And
example,
that's a card that's in a class that's doing something that you don't want it to do, right? If you're a
right,
warlock, you
right.
couldn't care less that you're trying to draw cards. You want other benefits if you can get them.
Right. And look, we are aware, a lot of people say, oh, criticism is it gets in the way of one of the warrior's best weapons, right?
You don't have
Drop this on turn
weapons.
one. Yeah. I mean, it goes back to the
Like,
thing
what
that we
warrior
were
are
saying.
you guys playing? My warriors have 3 to 4 weapons. I'm lucky to draw half of them. I'm totally, it would be totally okay to get with this 1/3 hook in, right? Like,
Exactly. Look, yes, it gets, quote, gets in the way of Fiery War Axe if you want to play it next turn.
yes,
It gets in the
yes.
way of some other weapons, but think about what this weapon does. Like, it gives you a ping that you can use. It puts something down on the board. It has pirate synergy. It checks off all of these. It is the most flexible card that like you can possibly use. This flexibility is something that was absent from the
150.
Warriors before.
Look, we rate cards high when they're flexible, right? Like, that's what we do. I'm not saying this is a 150. You still do take a lot of face damage. But the flexibility is what makes it high, right? Like, people... Look, you deal 1 damage, then you deal 2 damage because you got a body and you got another hit, and then you deal 1 damage again. You've dealt 4 damage over the course of 3 turns. You spent 1 mana.
Yeah. And this is something in which like you always as a warrior a common theme that we saw, and one of the lessons that we learned, or I learned, I think Abington knew this very well before I did, was the importance of having multiple sources of damage, right? If you think about warrior, like one of the most important sources of damage is your weapon, but this is the reason that like bash is not that bad. Like it's a decent card, and stuff like cleave is really good, right? It's damage that is spread out and doesn't come from your weapon.
Yep.
Like because with the warrior, like one of the problems, going past the hero power is how do I sort of smooth things out and make it not as awkward, right? Because weapons, although they have huge value, they're very awkward in terms of you can only play a weapon one at a time. You show the damage that you can do, right?
Yep.
You show your opponent exactly how much damage you can do. And then if you want alternate sources of damage, yeah, you have your minions, but like your minions you can show, and this stuff you can show. So like it allows your opponent to play around it, even though you gain value. So with a card like N'Zoth's First Mate, it just provides the minimum in everything. And in Hearthstone, especially in the arena where trading and like minion interaction is number 1, number 2, and number 3, dealing exact damage and smoothing out your curve, like it's vastly important. So it prevents sort of counterplay because you always have this like exact number, right? So I think that's like super important. And it's one of the things that like they didn't give warriors to this extent. Like Cruel Taskmaster, that's cool. Cleave, that's cool. But those were like, if you sort of look at the flexibility of this card compared to that, it's night and day. So very excited about it.
Yeah, I like how you picked this and then the mage card because they came together. Ben Brode went on halfway stream and was like, wait, but we already gave the warrior a card that's better than this one. It already exists. We've already revealed it. Well, what's going on, guys? And meanwhile, we were here saying the same thing. We're like, wow, that's a really outsized reaction. But this is just, I mean, they're both obvious power creeps, right? Like, this First Mate, obviously, there's nothing quite like this in the meta. And same with the Faceless Summoner. But you look at the effects, and this is the one that's going to have the much larger effect.
Yeah.
Because of its flexibility.
Lastly, we're going to end with one of my most hated classes.
Okay,
Shaman.
Before we go to Shaman, because I know exactly what cards you're talking about, I am going to do one more point on the warrior, but more generally speaking, just in case people who don't know this, I tweeted Ben Brode earlier in the week based on a post on Arena HS that was asking a very good question, which is, if there are Cthulhu cards, like say Ancient Shield Bearer for the warrior, which is a rare card, what happens to the offering rates? Like, do people get more does the warrior get more classic cards because there's not like 3 rare cards now, there's only 2 rare cards that's getting the offering bonus, so effectively all your other cards don't get penalized as much? Or do the other class cards for the warrior kind of fill in the gap? And Ben Brode responded really quickly and said, let me clarify the question. Okay, I got it. Your class cards fill the gap. Your Whispers of the Old God class cards fill the gap. And what that means is crazy things are happening with the offering odds. And I'm just going to outline this with the warrior, just so you guys know. Warrior has 2 rare class cards. They are normally class cards are offered about twice, like about half as much. Class cards are offered twice as much as normal cards. Rare cards, because of the fact that you're guaranteed a rare card on 10, 20, and 30. Your 10th pick, 20th pick, and 30th pick. Rare cards are generally offered about half as much as common cards. The offering bonus, let's assume, is 33% for Whispers of the Old Gods. Ancient Shieldbearer, one of the rare warrior cards, is out. That means the other 2 cards that were originally going to be offered 133% times now split the Ancient Shieldbearer's offering rate. So now each of them will be offered double what they were normally going to be offered. So Bloodsail Cultist, which is a rare warrior card, will be offered twice as much as other rare warrior cards, which means that it will be offered just as much as a common warrior card like Fiery War Axe, Arathi Weaponsmith, Bolster. This is where Bloodsail Cultist is. And this is not just the case with the warrior. Think about a class where a Cthulhu card is in the commons, right? Say like, I don't know, let's go with Druid, right? Druid and Dark Arakoa, which is a Cthulhu card. You don't have to remember that. It means their other 2 cards.
I hope they don't remember it by that name.
Their other 2 class common cards are being offered just ridiculous rates, right? You'll just see them everywhere. Well, you won't see them everywhere because they're not. Well, maybe Mark of Yogi you'll see everywhere, because their other 2 class cards are Mark of Yasiraj, 2 mana, give the minion +2/+2. If it's a beast, draw a card. Good. You'll see it in plenty of places. It'll be offered a lot. Or Feral Rage, 3 mana. It's either a Heroic Strike or you gain 8 armor. Not so good, but you'll still see it enough because it just gets offered a lot. Anyway, back to the warrior. The point I want to make with the warrior, and I go really much deeper into this in my video series on the warrior, is that Bloodsail Cultist is one of the cards that's the rare card. It's an insanely good card. It's a 3 mana 3/4 pirate, and it has a battle cry that says, if you control a pirate such as N'Zoth's first mate, give your weapon +1/+1. Okay, it doesn't actually say such as N'Zoth's first mate, but that's very much implied. Give your weapon +1/+1. So you play N'Zoth's first mate turn 1, it doesn't get removed, you coin out a Bloodsail Cultist. What happens? You have a 2/4 weapon with a 1/1 body and a 3/4 body.
Okay.
And both of these are essentially common class cards. Like, it's ridiculous. The implications are ridiculous. And the other warrior rare card is Blood to Ichor, 1 mana, deal 1 damage to a minion. If it survives, summon a 2/2 slime. So it's like Bash, like a mini Bash.
It's just ridiculous. It's so good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're just like such good cards, and they're being offered at these really enhanced offering rates. So you may be thinking that like LOE offering rates are going down. You're not going to see like, Obsidian Destroyers. You're not going to see Monkeys as much. But like these cards are like equally ridiculous, and they have ridiculous additional offering rates now. The Warrior's definitely going to be fine. Like,
you just blew my mind with that. Like, that scenario we're going to see so often.
Yeah, that's just
and
math.
It's something like you basically combining the offering rate of this with these scenarios. Now I'm just like, if I'm facing a warrior who turn 1, or he has the coin turn 1, N'Zoth's first mate, you don't think like, oh, okay, I drop a 2/3. Now you're just like, damn, I should ping that because of the Bloodsail Cultist. And it really, like, once again, this, I was just going at it in terms of like, oh, this changes pings and everything, but now it changes like into a very powerful coin play, right?
It's just like you still play around Shatter Sun Cleric.
Yeah.
So you're definitely going to play around Bloodsail Cultist.
It's crazy. It's like when Vaelin's Chosen first come out. You're like, okay, when previous to Vaelin's Chosen, they dropped a turn 1 North Star Cleric. You're like, I don't care, right? Yeah. And then after they came out with Vaelin's Chosen, if they had the coin, it's like, well, all right, I have to be afraid of coin Vaelin's Chosen. Suddenly they have a 3/7, right? Yep. On turn 2. So this is really interesting. And like whenever you have these simple interactions that can just crush the other player, it's
you just win the game, right? That's the problem with divine strength, right? In the early going, you just like you end up with like a 4/2 and a 3/2 on the board, and your opponent is about to play his 3-drop. Like, good game.
Yeah. So that's pretty cool. All right.
All right.
Are we moving on to
Yeah,
the
let's move on to the
last-
shaman cards you were talking about. I wonder what shaman cards you wanted to talk about. And this is a legitimate wonder because they're all kind of ridiculous. So you
They're
could have
all
really
ridiculous.
picked any of them, and I would not have been that surprised.
But knowing my rule of only picking the common cards, which I have followed, and let's not dig.
So it's Hazel the Ascended, isn't it?
Well, first of all, your pronunciation of that is terrible, but it's
Halaziel the Ascended.
I
actually looked at the letters this time.
All right, Flame Wreathed Faceless.
Flame Wreath
4
Faceless.
mana, 7/7, dies to BGH. Period. 0 out of 10. Would not
It
play.
also overloads you too, right? It's the worst way to die to BGH.
Exactly. But 4 mana, 7/7, overload 2. Now, I wanted to talk about it because we've seen something analogous to this in terms of Fireguard Destroyer, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so Fireguard Destroyer sort of serves as a warning, I guess, to Flame Wreath Faceless. Like, are you going to pick this card? Yes. Is it going to be really good? Yeah. And you're going to like a 7/7.
Wow, that's like a really bad warning. I wish I got more warnings like that in my life.
It's like, warning, you will like this. This will be good for you.
Exactly.
Warning over. All right. Well, okay. Past that warning, one of the things that really held back shamans, even though they got an incredible stat stick in Fireguard Destroyer, was just their lack of consistency, right? And their lack of consistency and their dependency on the draft in terms of shaman drafts with a Flame Tongue Totem are exponentially more powerful than ones without. Shamans require, even if they draft premium cards like Lightning Bolt and Crackle, those cards are sometimes
You have a weird definition of premium, man.
good cards. Like Lightning Bolts, sometimes you need to roll that spell power totem, right? Crackle, like everyone's won/lost games based on one Crackle roll.
Yep.
When you get your hero power is RNG, your draft is RNG. All of these are dependent. When you layer RNG on top of RNG on top of RNG, one stabilizing feature, if it is just a minion without initiative, you got to watch out for that, right? It won't make the impact that you want it to make, because a lot of times you aren't winning and losing based on the Flame Wreath Faceless. You're winning and losing based on your Crackles. And you have to shift that dynamic into when your wins and losses are more dependent on vanilla minions or on things that are constant and you can control.
Yeah, and I don't even know why you're thinking that this is a constant. This is the opposite of a constant. It overloads for 2. It gets hard removed. It spends 6 of your mana.
You can plan for that. Like, it is something that will happen.
Okay, but like I'm saying, this just adds another layer of RNG into it. If your opponent has a hard removal, you're just playing a 6 mana card into your opponent's hard removal. And then, even worse than that, the next turn, you have no way to recover.
Sure.
Because you have 2 of your mana is actually coming from the turn after that.
Well, that's sort of the fear of playing big stuff in general, right? Like, if they do have that polymorph, or if they do have that hex.
Yeah, right. But like, you can't play this on turn 4 because everyone like thinks you're going to play this on turn 4. This is pointless on turn 4. What are you going to use the 7 attack for on turn 4?
You don't necessarily need to play on turn 4.
It's like you don't Earth Elemental on turn 5. Like, it's just kind of pointless to do it at that time. Right. You do it later on.
I mean, the point I really want to make is sort of like, look, this pushes shamans in terms of like, yes, it's a great minion. It's a very nice minion as well. Do we see enough on shamans on the other end? Like, and I don't know. Like, they got some pretty good rares as well.
Have you looked at Evolve? Have you just like read the words? Because I read it and I read it wrong. I read it wrong because it was inconceivable to my mind what its actual words were.
I know. And that's sort of
Evolve, by the way, is 1 mana. Transform your minions, as in all your minions, including your totems, into random minions that cost 1 mana more.
Yeah.
1 mana.
So that's the thing, like, the overall message. Like, I think Shaman's got good cards, but you have to, like, a lot of these cards are still RNG, right? And in Constructed, that could work, because if you have positive RNG and positive RNG and positive RNG, like, overall, if you have a lot of positive RNG, you're going to win a lot of games. in the arena, that's like, you have the RNG with the draft. Your minions aren't that great. Some of your removals are right? And then because of this, like, I think even though Shaman's got like a significant boost in card value, I don't know if it changes that dynamic. And that's what I want to say. I'm like, let's be careful about thinking that Shaman is going to be better in the arena, because I'm just like, it doesn't address the fundamental weakness of Shaman in the arena, right?
Yep.
Which there is some overlap with the weakness of Shaman in Constructed, but in Constructed, a lot of times, you could just say Overload is bad, and their cards are like really weak as well. In the arena, it's like, it is really at its fundamental core. I'm like, damn, like it goes back to the draft. It goes back to all of these like super RNG elements layered on top of each other. And now we have like, these evolved cards and like Master of Evolution. Like these are things that like, still introduce some RNG, but are very powerful. And I'm interested in seeing how the Shaman comes out of this, right? Shaman could do very well. And because the game slows down, maybe like, these aren't as punishing, right? Because the effect from these cards is sort of spread out through many more turns, in which you have more chances and to have like either vanilla minions or RNG cards have more of an impact on the game. So that singular impact of one RNG sort of roll doesn't affect the game as much. But we'll see.
I mean, here you are hating on the Shaman again. I think everybody else, including me, thinks the Shaman's going to do quite well in this new meta. The question is just how much better, right? It's not whether they're going to get better. Like, if people are thinking they're going to be mage and rogue, that's kind of, I think, hopelessly optimistic.
Yeah.
But if people are thinking they're still down there with rogue and with hunter and priest, you got to look at these cards. Come on, like
Definitely.
these cards are really powerful.
All right, so that concludes my top 5 list. No forbidden cards in there. I guess I'm just not a fan of 150 score cards as you are.
All right, so we're like halfway through the list, but I don't want to make this a 4-hour podcast special, so we're gonna blow through 2 of these things. Top Old Gods classes. Give me your 1, your 2, your 3.
Ooh.
As in the new meta, not as in who like improved or deproved or like whatever.
The new meta. Look. So right now, the top 3 in some order are Rogue, Mage, and Paladin, right? I don't think it would change that much.
Totally agree.
I think, though, it's going to be Mage number 1, Rogue number 2, because it still has a very strong matchup against the Paladin, and then Paladin number 3. What about you?
I agree.
Wow.
I think that's where we are right now. I think that's gonna stay because all 3 classes got good cards, but nothing was totally great. Like if anything, Paladin is going to do better than the other 2, but the meta really favors the mage, and the rogue did get one insane card. 5 damage. 3 mana, 5 damage. It's finally happened. You know, it's that like ridiculous. That cutoff point, right? Like like no more. At least not for rogue. It's not that big of a deal because it's just one class and it's rogue. And you don't really see rogue that often, but like it's something, right?
It's such a important break point as well, right? Like Eviscerate was always really good in terms of like the 4 damage is important. 5 damage spells were always clunky. Always. Like they always costed like if you look at all the 5 damage spells in the game, it was like Starfall, Starfire, Demon Heart, like these things, like really
Arcanite Reaper.
Yeah, Arcanite, like heavy stuff. That's why 5 health minions were so important, right? If you wanted to get rid of it in one swoop, you had to make more of an investment. The fact that Rogue has a tempo efficient way of getting rid of 5 health, and if you want to talk about it, 6 health, because if they have a leftover dagger, it's past that dagger, right? It just gives rogues this ability that almost no one had before, even though like
no one has it.
By
the way, if you guys are wondering what it is, it's Shadow Strike. It's 3 mana, common rogue spell. Deal 5 damage to an undamaged character. So
okay,
it's just there's not much to say there besides it exists now. Watch out for it if you're facing a rogue. Your Yetis are not safe. God, your Yetis are so safe always to like everybody. That was such an insane like meta thing.
So now we talked about the best classes. I guess we go in the other direction.
Let's go to the worst classes, and then we'll give our Lightforge Worst Card Design Award. We're going to do this now for every expansion, where we give an award to the worst card design, and we have a couple runner-ups. It's our way of rewarding Blizzard for bad card design that really should never have happened. All right, so worst OG classes. I think it's so obvious. I think it's just Hunter.
Totally disagree with you.
What do you think is who do you think is next to Hunter, or who do you think is worse than Hunter?
So here's the thing that I think the worst class is still going to be Priest.
What?
Yes.
No way. No way. Everything's slowing, everything's taunting. There are more health on things than there are attacks. No way. Priest is on the board.
I think the Priest, one of the reasons that the Priest has always been bad, right? If not like the worst class, like one of the worst class, like close to one of the worst classes, is lack of early game, right? Lack of early game. I said it before, this patch, Priest needs like another Shrinkmeister, right? It needs a Shrinkmeister.
Well, that would have been good, but it's not like anyone else got it except Hunter.
So what did Priest get this patch? It got Darkshire Alchemist, which is a 5 mana 4/5 with a battle cry of restore 5 health.
Okay, let's ignore what it got. Let's say it got nothing.
Okay, if it got nothing, right? Priest is really bad. Even look, you can say that the meta is shifting slower, right? And that favors Priest. How does that change when the Priest still can't get on the board?
Because the other people can't either, because they're drafting slower.
No, the other people do it. It's not about who can do it. It's about who can do it better. The fact that other people are going to have a tougher time, Priests are going to have a tougher time than they are, right? Like look, Paladins are, you know, it's going to be tougher for them to like shoot a mini muster and yada yada yada, right? But it's going to be even tougher for the Priest to get on the board. It's all relative. So if it is tougher, like they're not on the board, they still can't do anything, right? And the cards that they got, they are clunky, they're situational, and they're about
I'm ignoring all the cards that they got. I don't care about the cards that they got. I'm just talking about the meta. The meta is going to have things with high health. Everybody's going to play things with high health. Everyone's going to play things with low attack. Priest is on the board. Priest can use its hero power. And a lot of the things that, and I'll talk about this in my video. I think my Priest video is going to be the last one released. So this is a preview of what's going to come out Monday night. A lot of the things coming out now is very, very good for Shadow Word Pain. Very, very good. And almost nothing that's coming out has 4 attack. Like this meta is the Priest wheelhouse. So yeah, the Priest isn't really getting amazing cards. Yeah, they haven't gotten any curve cards and they're desperately in need of it. I don't think they need to curve out better than other classes. I don't even think they need to curve out as well as other classes in order to not be the worst class. Because we're just arguing about which class is going to be the worst class.
Right,
and
right.
I think we both agree Priest and Hunter are kind of at the same level right now. Like maybe Priest is a little below Hunter.
Close.
But they're close.
And so that's why the exact opposite reason of why I think Priest, like, you know, Priest I think is going to be bad because if you look at the cards, they are terrible for, like, you can't play them early game. And they're even like late game, some of the cards, right?
I don't know. I think you're not considering the Cthulhu effect because the rare cards are Cthulhu and the rare cards are Shifting Shade and Shadow Word Horror, which are both pretty good.
Shifting Shade is still a very slow card, right?
Okay, but it's like really
Shadow
good.
Word Horror is still situational. Like it's 2 and below.
Sure.
Hunters, on the other hand, got Fiery Bat, a 1-drop.
But what are they going to do? What are they going to do when everyone taunts on every turn? You got taunts now on every turn.
And you are thinking that...
Wait, so you're saying your opponent just won't curve out?
It's going to be tougher, right? Like,
okay, but if your opponents don't curve out, you're fine as the Priest. You can't say, oh, I'm a Hunter, my opponents don't curve out. Oh, I'm a Priest, my opponents curve out, sorry.
Well, no. Look, it's relative, right? I'm saying you as a Hunter are going to be able to curve out better relative to the field. You as a Priest are going to have a much tougher time curving out relative to the field because of the Priest's lack of choices and the Hunter's increased chances of getting this 1-drop that's pretty good.
I'm not saying the Priest is going to curve out better than the Hunter. I'm saying if you're looking at the Hunter and saying it's getting a better curve, I agree. If you're saying everyone else is getting like a worse curve, I agree as well. If you're saying that doesn't affect the Priest, I don't agree. The Priest is affected by the exact same things that everyone else is affected by. I don't know why you're just drawing an exception here.
I don't think I'm drawing an exception. I think we're talking about sort of, my situation is saying, on average, you're going to curve out more with the hunter.
I'm
right?
not
And
saying
that
I'm
is
not disagreeing with that, but I'm
extraordinarily
saying
powerful.
I'm not disagreeing with that. I'm saying the priest doesn't need to curve out better than the hunter to win, because the priest, all the
Okay.
priest needs is to be on the board, right? All the priest needs, it's like a paladin, right? All you need is to be on the board, and then you win the game eventually. If you don't die, you're not going to die because of taunts. You're going to be on the board because everyone's playing high health, low attack minions, which means it takes a couple turns for like all the minions to like trade and hit each other.
Right.
And you're going to have like mid game tempo swings better than you used to, because all your removals are working on better targets now.
And that's the thing.
That's my prediction.
Like, how important is this distinction, right? Like, because we offer it different importance. I think it's very important. You think it's less so important, especially for the priest, right? So this is something that we'll see, and it's something in which man, looking back at all the predictions we've made for like all the expansions, I'm like, we've been right quite a few times, but the times in which we like vehemently fight over one thing, like those are the best, because it really forces us to think about this and then like go back and really embarrass the other person by throwing it in their face. So
Yes.
I do look forward to the result of this.
I will hold the Kraken over you forever.
And I'll hold the zombie chow over you.
That's true. God, I hated zombie chow when it came out.
You did. I was telling you, I was like, this is the new thing.
When I first got it, I was like, is this better than a Worgen? It seems ridiculous now.
And I was like, I can't deal with you. But anyways, I look forward to this, and this is sort of, I guess we can talk about the worst card design if we're talking about sort of as a lead
All right.
into
What are your candidates for the worst card design?
Woo, worst card design. So worst card design does not mean that I don't like the card, right? It is.
We have different definitions of worst card design, but okay, go on.
I just think that in terms of card design, it is just like so, because I think you should have a certain vision, right? You should have a certain vision, and that vision shouldn't be let's open up everything, right? Now, some people might disagree, and look, this is a category in which I think everyone will have a different answer, and the criteria could even be different, right? My card, I just don't like the way it was designed, and this is for arena, not for constructed.
Okay. Yep.
But it is Renounce Darkness.
Okay.
It is Renounce Darkness. So
what don't you like about the card design?
It is. So first of all, the card is an epic Warlock spell, 2 mana. Replace your hero power and Warlock cards with another classes. The cards cost 1 less. In terms of will this card appear on Trollden? 110%. 110%. This is going to be a card that is going to make so many posts, right? But it's a card in which I'm like, it just, design wise, it just tosses everything at the wall. And it's like, this is fun, and yes, it will be fun, but how do you plan this card, right? Like, there's no planning involved. It is literally just like chucking everything at the wall and being like, let's have a go at it, let's have fun. And I can understand in constructed you being able to plan around it. In arena though, I'm just like, this is such a card that I'm like, it is so useless, right? For the arena in that way. It is so useless. And that's one thing that I don't like about cards in the arena. Like, if it's so useless that like it just no way to plan around it, no way to skillfully play this card, really. I'm just like, don't like it. Don't like the design of it. And wish they did something else with the card. But look, we operate in a constructed and arena world, so I do understand it.
Okay. So before I give my first nominee for worst card design in Whispers of the Old God, I kind of want to thank Blizzard for one thing. It's going to seem really subtle, but I really like that they did this. So there's a taunt meta coming in, right? We all agree with that. It doesn't take a brilliant person to figure that out. When you look through the cards, you see all the taunts like everywhere and all the defense. But Blizzard slipped these 2 cards in, and there's a reason for it, because they didn't do a lot of like random things in this. It was all very defensive, except they have Blackwater Pirate, which is a neutral card, and it is a rare card. It's a 4 mana 2/5 pirate that says your weapons cost 2 less. And they have another rare card, neutral, called 3 mana 3/5. It's Silithid Swarmer, and it says can only attack if your hero attacked this turn. So neither of them are good cards. But those two cards are pretty much useless unless you are a weapon and or attacking class, which includes Druid. Like, it's a little weird to like add in there, but yeah. And they did this. I don't know if this is intentional, but this is definitely the effect it'll have on the arena to kind of dull the edges a little bit and give a couple of more, possibly more playable cards to classes that are going to be disproportionately hurt by taunts. Because taunts block weapons, taunts block attacking. And so these cards have the opposite effect. You see them do that with Inspire too, where they put a bunch of Inspire cards and then they have like Coliseum Manager, and you're like, all right, fine. So I like that they did that when they're instituting the taunt meta. So anyway, moving on to bad card design. This is one of the card designs that I hate the most, and I know I'm going to get a lot of pushback on this, but it's a common card. It's a 3-mana common card. It's a 1/5, and it is called Amgam Rager. This is just a joke.
I disagree with you there.
This is just a total joke of a card, because for 3 mana you can easily get a 2/5. And so now Magma Rager and this Amgam Rager, also known as Magma spelled backwards, are 2 understated cards for no good reason, just for a joke. Just so Blizzard can be like, haha, look at Amgam Rager. We got Amgam Rager. There is nothing, there's no possible redeeming playability factor in the arena. There's none in Constructed. There's none anywhere. Blizzard just used a card spot, got some art for a joke. I think that pushes it a little too far to release it as part of the set. And I know I'm going to get pushback for it, because this isn't just me being not fun, but I was really hoping to get a card. And instead, we have Amgam Rager.
Wow. No love for the Hobgoblin synergy.
No love for the Hobgoblin synergy.
Terrible. Mm-hmm. All right. So
actually, you know what? That's a good point. I didn't even think about the Hobgoblin synergy. Maybe there is a use in Constructed for this card. Maybe I am judging it a little too harshly.
I think you are.
Maybe it's meant for the Hobgoblin. I don't know enough about Hobgoblin Constructed decks to know whether this is at all a plausible thing, or if like 2/5 would still be more consistent because you're only getting 2 freaking Hobgoblins. But that is something. That is something. That makes me hate the card a little less. But still, this is like such a useless card. Like we talk about like how we don't like useless cards in the arena, right? This is a useless neutral card, right? There's a couple of other ones coming in too, right? Like Shatter, 2 mana, destroy a frozen minion. That one you can tell why it's there, right? It's for Constructed.
And I'm sure it'll make its way into like a few Constructed decks, right? Like you could definitely see the purpose of it, but in arena,
Hobgoblin is not even in Standard anymore.
It isn't. Oh
god, come on, Amgam Rager, come on, Blitz. Okay, whatever. All right, that's my nominee for bad card design.
All right.
You have any more?
I'm good, man. Like,
you're good.
For how much I hate on cards, I don't hate them that much. All right, like, don't paint me in that light.
Okay, well, Divine Strength aside, I have one more card I want to talk about just bad card design, and it's another bad card. It's a priest card, and it is a common card, and it is Power Word Tentacles. And you're gonna hate this card as much as me if you're a priest player, because one of the priest common cards is Hooded Acolyte, which means it's a Cthulhu card, which means Power Word Tentacles will be offered twice as much as other priest class cards, which means that Power Word Tentacles will be offered 4 times as much as a Yeti. Are you excited about Power Word Tentacles? It depends on if you know what Power Word Tentacles is.
Yeah.
Power Word Tentacles is a 5 mana card that is a buff that says give a minion +2/+6. +2/+6 being +2 defense more than Valence Chosen, or as Merps put it when we talked about it earlier, it's like playing a Valence Chosen and then healing your minion with your hero power, except you can't do it until turn 5.
Yep. It's amazing. Oh, and no spell power, obviously.
Yeah, obviously no spell power. Why would it have that? So I hope this is a card that used to be better and they tested it and they were like, oh no, this is overpowered, and then they just like nerfed it to hell before we saw it. Because there's no reason for this card to exist. It helps nobody. I can't, like, it's 5 mana. Even if you're trying to go for like weird inner fire synergies or whatever, this is like way too much.
It is really terrible. And why do tentacles give you a lot of health? Shouldn't it give you Wind Fury? That's my question.
I mean, it should give you something that is
It
not
should give you
health.
Mega Wind Fury.
It
If
should.
you have that many tentacles.
Yeah, you
right?
should get Mega Wind Fury. Maybe that's what it had, and then it was like OP, and they're like, all right, we're just gonna get rid of the Mega Wind Fury.
It's stuff like this that really takes me out of the realism that Hearthstone offers, you know? So.
Yeah,
0 out
well,
of
you're
10.
gonna get offered power with tentacles
not play.
a lot. Like, a lot.
Yep.
Alright, well, that's it for the worst card designs. You want to wrap this up?
I do. So, in short, freaking finally, this expansion is coming. Like, we have experienced the longest period between expansions, right? And I think we're all ready to sort of experience the new meta. And, you know, this is, I think, something that we can sort of conclude by looking at all these cards is it going to have a big impact on the arena? Yes, like every expansion that comes out is going to have a huge impact on the arena because of the increased offering rates, right? But if you look at these card designs, like what are the things that they introduce? They introduce old gods, right? Which really don't affect the arena that much. And like, you know, these legendaries, you're not going to draft.
Athiuen is the old god that affects the arena the most, and that's because its absence makes the other cards more
Right. It's the absence of a god that actually impacts it the most. But this is something that we expected, right? Because Blizzard is obviously thinking of constructed, they can't put out like they can't switch from wild into standard while at the same time introducing the old gods, while at the same time introducing like a discover or inspire mechanic, right? That would just be too much. So what do? They sort of go more vanilla with this and expect that the change from wild into standard is going to be the big change, right? You can't have so many big changes at once. And I think they did it very artfully, balancing out constructed and arena, because if you can't introduce a new mechanic, then what you do is you use the tools that you have to still make an impactful sort of like effect on the arena, right? And you have that with taunts. You have that with the distribution of early cards versus the late cards, and you use it with sort of class commons versus class rares. And I think, look, I can't get into the minds of the devs. I can't get into the minds of, you know, the people who have spent hundreds and thousands of hours on this. But I think that arena was very much on their minds when they came up with this expansion. And you could see it with the neutrals, with the rares, and with the classes as well. You can be unhappy that paladins and mages still got strong cards, and you know that might be something
I think they missed on the divine strength card. I really don't think that they knew how powerful that card was going to be.
Yes. But if you look at the expansion overall, I think you have to be pretty happy in terms of, because you know they're going to be thinking about constructed first, and you're like, well, man, if arena is going to be an afterthought, this could be really dangerous. And in the end, I'm very happy with the way that this expansion turned out, because I think that, you know, even though they prioritize construction, I'm like, the arena really, like, you're going to see a huge effect, but I think this is a healthy effect, you know, and it just introduces a healthy new meta in here, and I'm just really excited to see what they have to offer. And beyond that, I'm really excited to see the next expansion as well, because with this one, if they were thinking like 80% constructed, 20% arena, and they still got it pretty good, next expansion, I'm like, if it's like 60% constructed, 40% arena, then it should be even better. So I am super excited about this expansion, and I'm even more excited about the future.
Exactly. So I'm going to come in with some news that Twitch chat is telling us right now, which is that, well, one, in the middle of doing this live, so we record the Lightforge podcast live in front of a non-studio audience on our Twitch channel. And so this is happening in real time, and news is coming in. The patch was released in the middle of our Lightforge podcast recording, and it seems that they made an update where the arena reward packs are going to be Whispers of the Old God only. So everybody thought that the packs were going to rotate GVG packs out, right? Because you can't even buy them anymore. But now you can it's actually the only the newest expansion, which is going to be great, because that was always one of the complaints about the arena, which is that you can't pick which pack you got. So being able to get only the new pack will, I think, get a lot of people back into the arena. And I don't know how long it's for or anything. I'm just literally hearing this from Twitch chat right now. So you should go look it up if you're listening to this in podcast form. And I agree with what Merps was saying about this expansion, right? It's very clearly a constructed expansion, and they could have screwed it up in so many ways for the arena. In fact, I think we were somewhat convinced they were going to screw it up for the arena in some way, because it's one of two ways, right? You can either screw up the balance, or you can just do nothing, right? Like, I thought they were going to just do nothing, because there were no cards revealed that were really good until the very, very end, right? So, but without the Bog Creeper, if Bog Creeper was not a card, this would be kind of a much less interesting world for the arena. But Bog Creeper, I think, really came in and saved the day. And when it comes to just general design in the arena in the future, class balance is still okay. I'm worried about the Hunter, but the fact that Merps is not worried about the Hunter, and Merps is worried about the Priest, while I'm not worried about the Priest, I think it shows that even if one of those classes becomes definitely the worst class, it won't be so out of, like, it will still be in the meta, right? Yep. It won't be so out of touch with where the rest of the classes are, the way the Warrior was after TGT. And, like, compare not just the communication with Blizzard, but like how the cards are being designed and what cards are being introduced from this to with TGT, and you can really see that Blizzard they're doing some stuff about the arena. There are people there doing passes about the arena, and we hope that this will get even a more intense treatment for the next expansion, when they don't have to worry as hardcore about constructed as this one. So, bright future ahead. Hope you guys have fun with Whispers of the Old Gods. I'm really excited about the meta. I'll be streaming on Tuesday night, starting at 7 p.m. Eastern Time as usual, and that happens to be the release of Whispers of the Old Gods. So that's when I'll first be playing the expansion and opening all my packs. So it's going to be exciting. Hope you join me if you're playing as well. And anything else you want to add, Merps?
Nope. Look, it's been a long week for both of us, but at the end of the day, we are super excited, and we want to dive into this new meta. We want to really explore it, and we want to come back with you guys and sort of share all the information we've gathered, right? It's what we love doing, and when there's a new meta involved, like, that's when we really get to work. Right. Mm-hmm. And that's when we want to like play as much as possible, really analyze as much as possible as well. And you guys have seen how much we analyze, even when there's like a 3-month-old meta. Right. Yeah. So this is very exciting for us. And I just want to say, see you guys on the other side, and looking forward to Whispers of the Old Gods.
The Lightforge.com tier list will be updated on the day the expansion comes out. So look forward to that. And we'll have some cool stuff on it, other stuff as well.
All right, guys, that wraps up this marathon of a podcast. We'll see you next week, all right?
Bye.
See ya.